Oh, the rebuild will be different?
Everybody good?
Yes, sir.
Jeremy? Okay. All right, good evening, everyone. Today is Monday, November 25th, 2024. I've got 7:05 p.m., so we'll go ahead and call this meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order. We've got a nice long agenda this evening, and we will get started with items from the Department of Public Service. Good evening, Senior Deputy Director.
Are there particular questions on this? This was brought back to committee.
No presentation or anything starts. We can just start with questions then. Mr. Renner?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to do the easy one first. I have a few questions. The internal water and sewer, or the water and sewer internal board, I understand, I'm trying to get my notes here. This is just basically a code change to change from the chair of this board from the Director of Public Service to the mayor?
Yeah, that would be the first change in there, would be escalating it from the Director of Public Service to the mayor or designee, adding another layer of approval in the process. Or appeal in the process, if you want to say it that way.
Okay. Can you elaborate on to why that's desired, why that's needed?
Well, so currently the process is that any appeal by a resident as it relates to something they feel is unwarranted on their utility bill goes to the Director of Public Service to be reviewed. And the Director of Public Service has the ability to make certain adjustments to that bill. If the resident does not feel that the adjustments made by the Director of Public Service are sufficient, they can then appeal to the Water and Sewer Internal Review Board, which is then chaired by the Director of Public Service. So we're trying to create another layer of an appeal so the person who denied it originally is not chairing the board on the next layer of appeal.
And who makes up the board?
So that is something that we will be revising. It's we haven't met in roughly 2 years for this. We have a few that are pending that we will get in the pipe on 25. So it'll be the mayor designee. So kind of depending on who the mayor wants to designate. And then who has served on in the past has been 2 residents. They have been 2 long-term or long-serving residents, so we would be looking at what the composition of the board should be made up of. It is an internal review board, so we really want people that are familiar with the composition of utilities and utility rates and adjustments as well.
So, and that's what I was really interested, because I was looking at our code, and it says that there's a chairman and 2 additional members appointed by the chairman. Is that right? Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, so that has been the current practice, and again, those 2 appointees have been residents of Gahanna.
Okay, so there's 3.
The chairman, and then 2 residents of Gahanna.
Okay.
Yep.
And it's chaired by the mayor, and then it's 2 residents.
It could be 2 residents, it's just 2 appointed by the chairperson, would be the way to go forward. We would review to ensure if it is those residents or if it's an internal staff member as well.
Okay, and are there, is there an outline or a document that actually talks about what the process is and how
So
this
once
is
we
recorded?
once we establish the hierarchy, this is something we talked with the previous city attorney on, is be more formalized with the agenda and approach. So we have a more, right now, essentially it's a summary, and those are the summaries that you've all been provided that talk about what the adjustments were. The code spells out what we're supposed to turn in to council that identifies, the property, the summary of the adjustment, and kind of like the net calculation of it. What we're going to work on internally is to formalize that internal review board, have a more solidified agenda and approach. Previously, I've worked with internal review boards for utilities, and usually there's a secretary that's assigned to it that builds the agenda, keeps the minutes, and does that. So that's an approach we're trying to. It's not a heavily used board. I think there's roughly maybe six a year, and a lot of those are fairly self-evident as to the director can make those claims or make those adjustments. But we do have some that are larger that need more of an analytical approach to it.
Okay, I really like the, what you're saying in terms of looking for people who can actually look at this and judge this and understand. I really stress that outside City Hall, there are residents, and I know in the past that there have been residents, and that's probably still a good practice because they're outside City Hall, and they're feeling the effects as well, or they're having water and sewer bills. If people have an issue, not just with the rates, but talking about their bill per se, and from what I understand is it goes to the director or the public service department, and then it gets escalated, right?
Right. So ideally, we've created the customer service area now, which is a little more encompassing than just the utility billing side. A lot of times, the resident will make a complaint with the customer service area. We have supervisors there now that can help streamline and work through some of those processes. If it's an error on the city's behalf because a late payment got applied prior to, they have that certain ability to waive that if it's under the guidance of the director. We then we need to revise it, a better appeals form. So if under that area that the resident feels that it has not adequately been resolved, they can submit what we would call an appeals form that would then trigger us to call a internal water sewer internal review board to go forward with. So the customer service supervisor and the director will work together to try to mitigate it within certain parameters, depending on the situation.
And communicating back to the resident about what the status is and where it's going.
Yes, yep.
And before, and maybe it's in the code, but I thought I read somewhere that the internal review board only meets quarterly. Is that still the intent?
So I'm not sure, I don't believe it actually indicates that it meets quarterly. The review board meets as needed. So it has not met in the last 2 years because we have not called a meeting to order on that.
Okay.
Now, we are required to report the summary of the board annually or unless called upon sooner by council.
Okay. So if there's even just one, the board, if I understand you correctly, the board will then be called and
Correct.
review.
Yes,
And go
and
forward.
that's what we're working on in formalizing that process as well. We do have some that have waited too long, that we need to get more timely and expedite those reviews. And the language actually has timelines for us to meet upon the completion or submission of an appeals form. It kind of then puts us on the clock to make sure that we're more timely.
Okay. Good. I've been fielding a fair number of questions from residents about their bills, and I've been trying to be there as a buffer, not to actually control information or to try to explain. This is, when I read my own personal bill. But one of the things that surprised me is that our bill does not say whether it's a real read or an estimate. Can you speak on that at all? I understand, and I found, and I was actually surprised in the FAQs that our bill actually it defaults to being an actual read, but then you never know when it's an estimate.
I'd have to look at whether electronic or paper bills. My understanding from what I've seen, that there should be an indicator on it that indicates whether it's an actual or an estimate. It's something we can look in. If there's a clarification that we could provide through Smart Bill, who does our billing. But I can double check to see if it's isolated to paper
Okay.
versus electronic. 'Cause
The
sometimes
handful
they
of
visually-
cases, yeah, sorry, they were going.
No,
No, the handful of cases that I reviewed were estimates and based on multiple months of estimates, and
Okay.
none of their bills actually showed that.
yeah, and so we
And
do
they
have.
found this out by talking to the service department.
And we do have an initiative that we're working on for the utility area is correction of dead meters as well. We do have quite a few of those that we are working to bring back online. So some of those could be dead meters that need to be changed out. Pandemic kind of took us off pace for those replacements. So that is something that, is a priority of this year.
Okay.
Because oftentimes they're going from multiple estimates to an actual can be costly
Yeah.
and to a resident that has used more than the estimate. Yeah.
I think Mrs. McGregor had a follow-up.
Please.
Yep.
I talked to, who's the supervisor in water billing?
Derek.
Derek? I talked to him on, I think Thursday or Friday, and he said, because the same question came up, and he said that their water bills do not have a place for estimate right now, but they're going to reformat the bill and will
Okay.
include that. They're working on reformatting the bill, so it will include that.
Okay, did he give a time on when?
Ask him that.
Okay.
And you could always, if it seems a need, you can always call the customer service here and they can pull that up. I know in our system, it shows that detail.
Now, individual residents can actually go to their meter and actually look at it, right?
Yes.
And that's true of all cases? They can actually see or open the cap and
I
actually
believe
see
that, I
the
believe all
meter?
of them have
Okay.
the numbers on there. Again, if it's a dead meter, then it's
Yeah.
not gonna.
If I can just quickly
Yep.
clarify. So the bill does have the start and end meter reading. And if it's an estimated bill, just as a tip, as an estimated bill, the start and end meter reading numbers will be the same.
Yeah.
Hopefully, we can get an estimate and an actual printed on the bill so you guys know that. But yeah, if they look at their meter, your meter is still working, your meter is still going up, but it's just receiving some kind of communication error back to the system. Where we're doing the water tower work, the water tower actually fell offline for a period of time because the contractor actually clipped the antenna. So it took a minute to get the antenna reattached and fixed. So then all of those communication errors came back, and then the bills were adjusted. So.
Thank you for that. Not everybody looks at the meter because you probably have it buried in your basement somewhere and maybe trapped, but that is the number one thing I always tell everybody. Go look at it, make sure that the meter reading is what you actually expect.
And and our customer service team is very accommodating as well. If somebody calls with any questions or concerns, we're fully staffed in that area right now, so we have the ability to troubleshoot, and if we need to send somebody out to look at it, we can do that as well.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. I believe Ms. Bowers also had a follow-up on.
Yeah, just a very quick follow-up. Mr. Weibensinger, you mentioned about the amendments to the process to create timelines under which requests for review would be handled. When do you anticipate that proposal or the amendments or that process to come forward for at least a draft review?
Well, so we would do it under an administrative policy for the board. So that would be because we have some backlog of that we need to get before the board, it would be a task of our public service area, our director in the customer service, to refine those procedures. We have procedures right now. They need to be fully vetted and updated.
And what's your timeline for that to be accomplished?
We would task it out in January. I would hope within 60 to 90 days, we would have a revision to those processes, updates to the forms. So by the end of the first quarter, we would be able to get caught up on the backlog of the Water and Sewer Review Board.
How long have how long have some of the complaints been pending?
I'd have to see, but well outside of the limitations that we have. So some, I would say, have been over a year.
What's our current process?
I'd have to go back and look at it, but what we try to do, I'd have to look at the ordinance details on that right now. Because again, it's been 2 years since they've met, so a lot of it is, let me go in here, I think I printed it.
Why not?
It would be in the complete ordinance. I printed off the only sections being updated. I mean, we can review those if need be. Do you want me to, I can send you the sections that would be pertaining, but it would spell out the current process that we have.
Yeah, that would be helpful. I think it would be helpful for me to understand too, whether it's a process that's been codified and the timeline is identified in the ordinance, or whether it's something that is purely administrative policy. Has the department been able to identify sort of the cause? Is this a staffing issue in terms of a cause of this situation?
For roundabout, yes. That area is seeing 100% turnover in the last 2 years, from the Director of Public Service to the Manager of Operations to the utility billing crew. So that's why we are relooking at all the processes and procedures that are down there.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, the feedback I'm getting is that the supervisor, what's his name again?
Derek?
Derek, yeah. So I hear lots of positive comments about him, and he sounds frustrated as well because he knows what the bill should be and what the process, it sounds like what the processes should be, but he's frustrated.
Yep. And so I helped train Derek when he got here to ensure what we're doing is we're looking at all of our policies and procedures down there,
Okay.
and really ensuring that what we're doing makes sense to the residents and for the business operations as well. We have additional support down there that we did not have 2 years ago, with the addition of a couple positions and a kind of a transformation of that area in itself. So we anticipate continued streamlines and efficiencies in these areas as we keep working through. As you know, last year we had some things we worked through with the actual timing of the billing that created some issues. So we had to work through a lot of those issues to make sure what we were doing made sense. And now we're kind of diving a little bit deeper now into the policies and procedures side of things.
All right, I want to move over to sewer rates.
Mr. Renner, before we
Oh,
move on, I
please.
think there's one more question from Ms. Bowers.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to make a quick comment that I very much appreciate you sharing this information with us. I think that this is an important process to help us understand how you're internally responding to things that are not going well and recognizing those things. And I think that this is part of the process that is sometimes uncomfortable but really critical. So I just wanted to thank you,
Sure.
Mr. Weibensinger. I know that these are hard questions and it's a hard conversation, but I wanted to make sure that we took that moment to recognize that.
Yeah, and a lot of it falls on the staff. They're doing the work. We give directives and we ask for things to be reviewed. It's the staff that is coming back with recommendations. Derek has done a great job of making practical recommendations Derek leads the people in the trenches, so he reviews the phone calls, he understands what the requests are coming in from the residents, and then taking that feedback and then trying to put it into practical application.
Well, and please extend our gratitude to Derek as well.
do.
Thank you. Okay.
All right, back to you, Mr. Renner.
No, I was actually going to say all that at the end, so I want to say ditto, Corey. It actually, by your responses and by your thoroughness of the responses, it gives me great confidence that you're looking at it, you're being candid with what the, where are the issues, and you're addressing them.
Yep.
And that gives me great confidence, so thank you. And now I want to move into confidence on the sewer rates.
Sure.
As we all know, the city of Columbus is actually on the commodity rate, they're going to go up by 6%. And yours is about 12%. And so I was just wondering because when residents ask, what can I tell them? What's that extra, 6% that is actually getting them?
Yeah, so we're looking at a more of a holistic 6-year approach as opposed to piecemeal year by year. Last year, you'll remember Columbus did a 6% increase in sanitary, and we did not increase sanitary rates 6% last year. So this is a leveling out on that. We prioritized water increase because we needed to catch up our water operations and water and sewer capital last year. So there was not a increase last year to the sanitary operations. So what this does is kind of level us back out to catch up over a 2-year period. But because we were able to catch up on the water side last year, we're able to not kind of apply that 7% this year because we're really looking at it on a multi-year approach as opposed to reactive to what Columbus has.
Okay, yeah, I was excited that there's no water increase proposed in '25.
And that was part of the complete 7% last year, which was higher than we really want to go. That's why this year we're back down to around 4.5, but we had to catch up those water funds to ensure that we are able to fund a lot of the improvements that we're trying to make, whether it's the professional services in some of the capital project, or getting to a level where we have an appropriate capital maintenance program for our city here.
Okay. So, and the average is what, 4,000 gallons a month?
That's what we base it on 4,000. We try to look at other similar communities, and we try to do everything on 4,000 gallons. There's a conversion rate because CCFs are not 1,000 gallons. CCFs are like 748. So we have a conversion rate, so we try to make everything apples to apples and balance everybody to like a family of 4, which would be, my house here would be 2 kids and 2 adults is roughly 4,000 gallons. So if you don't hit that 4,000 gallons and you're more of a minimum bill, you're not going to see the full impact. We're trying to let the average household know what the impact would be.
Yeah. For complete transparency, I'm about 1,000 gallons above that. So our household, it's 4 people and we're 5,000 gallons. And we used to be a lot more, but we found a leak.
Yeah.
Okay, so, and the ERU, I totally understand. And that's nothing in your control because that all goes to the city. On the storm, that was quite a little bit of a bump up, and so I was just curious as to what does that get?
So the storm, again, is catching up to, because that fund itself is not delineated between operation and capital. It is combined for dual use in that. So what that is kind of catching up from the operational side, but also with some of the preventative maintenance programs that we need to prioritize with some of our storm. Storm has been relatively low compared to neighboring communities, and what we are working through is the preventative maintenance program is about $1.25 million, I think, right around there, and building out our CCTV program for the storm system, along with some of the replacement sections as well.
Okay. Are you seeing an increase in impact on storm? Having to do more preventive maintenance or having?
Not that's made it to me as of yet, so that is something I know we've engineering is working through are some of the maintenance programs and really building those up to the levels they should be or enhancing to where they should be.
And then the final question is that we've all seen those long out projected rate increases from the city of Columbus to the year 2032. Have you guys done anything similar to that or gone to 5 years at least?
So again, we did the rate study with Baker Tilly back in '21, go live last year, '24, for a 6-year block of window. So if Columbus were to come back with a 15% on water, we know that that is roughly $1.1 to $1.2 million in anticipated cost for water for that bill. So knowing that with the fund balances we currently are carrying, we've also looked at, we're utilizing TIF funds for a lot of these projects to not work into that like unreserved fund balance. So we will have containing some sufficient fund balances. So if we were to see some of those spikes, we would anticipate some level of rate increase, but we should be able to absorb if it's anything. I think I noticed from Columbus, it was roughly a 3 to 4 year from 27 through 30 was anywhere between 12 and 15%. So it's certainly something that we're looking at. Again, our cost module will work as long as Columbus stays around the 8% or less is in that ballpark. But we are looking to see if we do see those 12 to 15. So every percent is, $85,000 roughly for like the water side of an increase. So we will be monitoring that, but so far everything it's a projection, but nothing that I think we need to let's just say overbill right now to hit that until we start seeing something a little more solid on it.
What do you want, or what are you planning to tell residents about this, about the impact on Gahanna?
When it occurs or preemptively?
Just right now, what message, or have you guys even figured it out?
I think I even said it, it's been 2 weeks ago, is, utilities are not getting cheaper, and we're trying everything we can to minimize the impact on residents. Whether it's utilization of TIP funds. We were just on a call today with the $999,000 OPWC grant and loan, utilizing some of those options to help continue to reduce the impact.
Okay. All right, thank you. I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Renner. Any other comments or questions from my colleagues? Okay, as Director Weibensinger mentioned, ordinance 86-24 has had a first reading. So I guess what is the will of council? Consent agenda, regular agenda?
I'm fine with consent.
All right, Mr. Clerk, consent agenda on that, please. Thank you, sir.
Question on the second item?
Any questions or follow-up on the second item? From the, there was a couple attachments on the hearings from 2020 and 21. Ms. Bowers?
Yeah, I guess, thank you. Just so we can preserve a record of this, my understanding that this is had these reports previously been provided to council?
So the request was for those reports. I don't know if they were, again, with staff transition, if they were emailed to council office, I wouldn't have the ability. But I wanted to make sure that they were shared.
Okay. Mr. Van Meter, did you have a chance to review our Legistar filings related to Water Review Board reports?
Yes, and the last that we had on file besides these most recent were from 2019.
Okay. So did we have on file the 2020 and the 2021?
No,
Okay,
not in Legistar.
okay. So going all right, so this is the first impression that we've had these, as an opportunity to preserve in our record keeping, it seems.
Perhaps.
Okay. All right. All right, thank you so much for your follow-up on these items. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Director. All right, next up, we will go to items from the Department of Engineering. Good evening, Director. Several items here for you today. My favorite committee
Excuse me.
meeting of the year, when you bring these forward.
Good evening, Chair Weaver and members of council. I have 3 items before you this evening. The first 2 items are requesting permission to bid for 2 projects upcoming for 2025. The first project is our annual street and sidewalk maintenance program. Requesting permission to bid. We provided a map indicating the streets that we intend to perform maintenance on coming up, as well as the sidewalk maintenance. And pause there for any questions.
Any questions or comments? Mr. Schnetzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Comley, question for you. The purple on the map is listed as preservation sealer. Is that the same as slurry seal?
No, it is not. That is an asphalt rejuvenating agent that is applied to the streets after 2 or 3 years. It just prolongs the longevity of the pavement.
Okay. Is that being used in lieu of slurry seal?
No, the streets that are marked with crack seal will also have a microsurfacing applied to it.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. The other question I have is, just looking at the map, obviously I don't have lane miles or anything calculated, but it does seem like there's a significantly more amount of purple than there is green. Is that just kind of where our streets are in the cycle, or are we approaching this differently?
So the purple is going back multiple years of street maintenance that we performed, and the cost associated with on a square yardage basis is extremely cheap comparative. So at the budget hearing last week, that was last Monday, I guess, I went over the cost associated with the street rebuild to mill and overlay to the crack seal and micro surfacing. This is a next tier down, again, to preserve that pavement.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Any other questions or comments on this item? I'll just say, Director, I so appreciate this program and all of your staff's efforts to bring this forward each year. For my side of town, thrilled to see Deer Run included on this. That's needed some attention, so appreciate that, its inclusion. So, this is a motion, so folks okay with consent next week on this? All right. And then, next
So
item.
the next item is we established a look-back program to catch up, if you will, on some previous street reconstruction, street maintenance related projects from 2021, 22, where the sidewalk program, we're going back to those program areas to perform maintenance on those streets. So we're requesting permission to bid on the look-back program to cover streets from previous years.
Any other questions or comments on this item? Seeing none, consent for next week.
I have
Oh,
one
Ms.
quick
Bowers.
question. Do you have a sense of where in the total look-back program, is this, could you give me like a ballpark percentage of sort of what this encompasses?
I'd say it's probably about 25% of the identified program area over that 3-year period.
Okay. And do you anticipate that it'll be even going forward, or that we might be able to pick up?
So I wish I had a crystal ball in regards to where prices are going to be. So until we bid things out, that's my challenge at this point.
Is there any opportunity if we see really great bids, that you would potentially consider expanding this year's so that we're not deferring more costs in the future?
There's some limitations in regards to how far you extend that out within the procurement side of things. So I think we can go up to 10, 15% more requesting additional. And you'd have to have a willing and able contractor to otherwise want to perform that.
I appreciate it. Thank you. That helps put this in context. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Consent okay for this one as well, then?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Next item, please, Director.
Yes, and the next one, we're requesting a resolution of necessity for the 2025 street rebuild and water line replacement. As a part of the rebuild on Laura, to maintain proper drainage, we're going to require 4 permanent easements to maintain stormwater on those streets as we rebuild them. So as a part of this, the resolution necessity gives our appraiser, negotiator, the opportunity to go out and discuss fair market value and settlement arrangements with those given property owners to secure those easements, and then we can proceed forward with the project.
Yes, Ms. Padova.
Thank you. So I had a question about the rebuild on Rocky Fork. If I remember correctly, it was supposed to be done a while back, and then it got delayed because of the way the road is and where the sidewalks would, that it kind of slants down.
Yes, and as we work through that with our design professional at GPD, we elevated the profile grade of the street to otherwise accommodate the sidewalk as well as the transitions for each of the, I want to say it's roughly 14 driveways in that section due to the topography in the area. So with that, we came up with a design solution to otherwise cover that, and we'll be including water line replacement in that corridor as well.
And so there will be sidewalks on both sides of?
Correct.
Okay. I wasn't sure if that was the case, so thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this item? Consent okay for this one next week?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, next up, we have items from council office. For this first one, I will turn things over to Clerk Van Meter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council, you have a notice from the Division of Liquor Control regarding upcoming renewals for Class C and Class D. I did attach to the agenda a report from the Ohio Division of Liquor Control that lists out all the different permit classes in addition to the locations and the owners of those permits. In checking with the Division of Police, there are no objections for any of those renewals, but the division does require you to notify them of any request for a hearing by January 2nd.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Any questions or comments on this?
I know that golf course is pretty sketchy. Okay.
All right.
That's a joke, for the record.
Seeing no objections, Mr. Clerk, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have ordinance 8924. This has had a first reading as well. Turn things over to Ms. Bowers, if there's any opening comments. If not, any other questions or comments from council? Okay. This has previously been discussed at committee, as noted, regular agenda or consent for this one? What is the will of council?
What, I would say consent.
Consent?
Is there any reason not to?
All right,
Oh,
great.
yeah.
Consent, thank you, Mr. Clerk. All right, next up, we have items from the mayor's office. We have a resolution, Madam Mayor?
I believe we have a proclamation. Yes, this is to recognize December as National Impaired Driving Prevention Month. Actually, I've issued a proclamation for this, I think, for the last 2 years. This would be the third or fourth year in a row, I believe. But I know council has an interest in doing that as well, so it makes sense to me. I have appreciated the opportunity to partner with council on doing these together. So I think actually further unifies and strengthens the message. So we do have this joint resolution and proclamation that would recognize December. We know that our officers are very intent and very focused on buckling down on drivers certainly who traverse through Gahanna. We have Officer Jeff Hoffman, who has been recognized 2 consecutive years by MAD for his efforts. And I know that they have a little bit of a competition themselves amongst the community, just not only being able to identify drivers who are driving impaired. It is something that has become increasingly prevalent, unfortunately, not just in Gahanna, but everywhere. So anything that we can do to help strengthen this message and communicate to our residents, I think is just a benefit for all of us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Any questions or comments from my colleagues? Yeah, Ms. Bowers.
Just to mention, just to bring it home a little bit, so as everyone I think knows, my husband's been a paramedic with Delaware County for over 20 years, and the other night he was on a shift and there were over 4 fatalities. He ran on at least one of them, and the trauma the secondary trauma that is caused through fatalities caused by impaired driving is something that I think we often overlook. But the impact on first responders who have to tell family members or who have to take that home with them and sort of bear that weight. I really wanted to it's very much present in my world, and I very much wanted to communicate that because it's something that I think that we need to make sure, again, that we continue to support our first responders, our police officers who are intervening and often having to deal with these really horrific situations where they're having to communicate to people that their mom or their sister or their brother is not coming home. So it's just very present right now, this time of year.
Thank you, Ms. Bowers. All right, seeing no further questions or comments on this item, we'll put this on consent, unless there's an objection. All right, moving right along, items from the city attorney's office. Madam City Attorney.
Thank you. This is a supplemental traffic code revision, mostly cleanup. I think the most substantive bulk of the ordinance involves slow-moving vehicles, which have been broken into 5 different code sections, in addition to the definition section. So otherwise, it's terminology changes and a few other minor revisions that have been outlined to you in the report to council. But essentially, we have an annual update by Muni Code that we go through every year. And so when I presented earlier this year, that was based on the 23 revisions, and then we have another set that came in this year. And so we should be back on track for 1 a year.
Thank you, Attorney Tamalaris. And any questions or comments on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll go on for first next week and then consent on the 16th. All right, thank you. Next up, we have items from the Senior Director of Administrative Services. A couple of items here. Good evening.
Good evening. HR Manager Ben Nolan's going to present the 2 ordinances this evening.
Well, good evening. So the first action item I have is the request for the 2025 salary ordinance for the unclassified personnel of the city of Gahanna. Each year prior to the adoption of the following year's budget, we bring forward the proposed salary ordinance to council for adoption. This ordinance sets forth the salaries for the non-union personnel of the city. For the salary adjustments to align with the 2025 new year, this is requested on emergency. I'll just go over generally the changes for the 2025 ordinance. The details of these changes were submitted in the report. The addition of classification titles and pay grades to align with the recommendations from the staffing study. deletions of job classifications that would no longer be in use based, again, on the recommendations of the staffing study. In Section 3, there is a request, as it is in the budget, for a 4% increase for employees' pay outside of the STEP program to occur on the first full pay period after their anniversary date. There is also clarifying language for our part-time employees who have reached the maximum of the pay grade, aligning the language that is used for full-time employees. So I'm happy to answer any salary ordinance questions if you have them.
All right, thank you, Mr. Nolan. Any questions or comments on this item? All right. Seeing none from my colleagues, I appreciate all the energy and effort that goes into preparing this and bringing it forward each year, and just a blanket statement that so grateful for all of our staff, and that this is always an important step in the process to making sure that we can continue to attract and retain top talent to our corner of the woods. So. Seeing no other questions or comments on this, we'll put this on for first next week, and then consent on the 16th, excuse me?
Just as a matter of process, I don't know that it should necessarily go on consent because the addition of the positions that would be included in Table 2.
That's fair. Yep. So on for regular then, yeah.
Yes, because there may need to be an amendment to this ordinance if there's budget discussions that would amend the positions that are requested.
Good catch, thank you. All right. On the regular agenda for the 16th, then, Mr. Clerk, please. Next item, please, Mr. Nolan.
Thank you. The next action item I have is the 2025 benefits ordinance. This is the companion ordinance for the 2025 salary ordinance for unclassified personnel. Modifications to this ordinance include some minor language changes for general text and formatting cleanup, removing sick leave tiers and replacing them with a standard rate for all years of service, removing special major medical leave and replacing this with short-term disability, adding paid parental leave for new parents, increasing the safety footwear reimbursements from $100 to $150, and finally, there's a proposed change that would allow for specialized footwear reimbursements for employees who need specialized footwear to perform their roles.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on this item?
I have a question.
Ms. Bowers.
Could you share with me a little bit more about the sick and injury leave amendments, specifically Section 2 and Section 7 to Article 7?
Either he's getting information or that's a no.
So Section 2, the accrual table, was reduced to the standard Ohio Revised Code section that other state and county employees and other municipal employees get. So it's reducing that table so that all years of service get the 120 hours. Part of the reason for that change is because the short-term disability program that the city has secured provides a short-term disability benefit of 13 weeks to employees that's paid at 60% up to a weekly maximum benefit, and then employees are allowed to supplement their leave to be whole. So the short-term disability provider handles all the medical, they certify it, they ask the city what the standard hours are, and then the weekly wage is sent weekly to that employee by the short-term disability provider. So with the short-term disability program and the paid parental leave, it reduces the amount of sick leave that individuals need to accrue for different items, because the short-term disability program covers any non-work-related accident or injury or medical procedure that you might not need to have as long as it's not elective.
So how much, is there a cap on how much sick leave employees can roll over or carry over year to year?
There's not.
Okay. And And so an employee accumulates 120 hours or can accumulate 120 hours per calendar year.
That is correct.
And sick leave is paid out at 100% state, like flat time?
No, it is not.
What is it paid out at?
I think it's 50
Sick time?
upon retire, if you,
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm just talking about like if you take, no, I don't mean upon retirement. I mean if you're taking sick
Yeah, if you-
leave, if you're paid standard hours.
Yeah, it's your hourly rate of pay.
Okay. Is there a cap, so if an employee accumulates, let's say 6 weeks or 8 weeks total of sick leave, and then they would like to take that sick leave for a major incident, can they take that sick leave so that they're not losing pay during that time, or would they be forced to take the short-term disability leave?
No, that would be an option if they wanted to take the short-term disability. Otherwise, they could use their paid leave. Our policies do require that paid leave runs concurrent with FMLA. So you can't opt to not be paid when you're, because in that scenario, the FMLA would likely apply.
But you could opt to be paid at your sick leave or the short-term disability if both applied?
That is correct. I'm not sure why someone would do that, but yes.
Well, like if they wanted to keep sick leave bank time, I suppose, for the future, could they take like 4 weeks sick leave and then short-term disability if it was like an 8-week leave?
If it was an 8-week leave, they would want to do the 13-week short-term disability program and have that insurance provider pay them the weekly wage and then supplement with their leave.
I see.
So it's up to a maximum benefit amount of $1,500 per week. So we do have some employees that may be over that weekly cap. And so you would have to supplement additional leave in order to be made whole. But under the short-term disability program, you could opt to do 60%. And then if you don't have sick leave, you could opt to not supplement your leave. And under the pension fund, under Ohio Revised Code, the city is required to pay the employee and the employer share of the pension. So under the short-term disability program for OPERS, no employee would lose service credit or the amount in their pension.
Okay, thank you.
any other questions or comments on this item? Yes, Ms. Jones.
Two, so addition of parental leave means we didn't have that before.
That is correct.
So kudos to the team in the city for adding that in. So special major medical leave and short-term disability, what I guess were there differences in what was?
Yeah, so the major medical leave, you had to have been an employee for a certain amount of years in order to use that benefit. And then in addition, you could only use it one time in a 5-year period. So the short-term disability is effective on the first day of the first month of your employment. So if you were hired today, you'd be eligible for short-term disability in December.
Okay. Yeah, excellent. I think, again, this is just more benefits to attract talent to the city, and so appreciate that. Appreciate these ads.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Ms. Dogan.
I just want to echo Ms. Jones' kudos on the family leave. That is definitely going to help attract more talent to the city. So thank you. Good work.
All right, seeing no further comments or questions, on for first next week and then the regular agenda on the 16th. All right, thank you very much. Anything else for the Committee of the Whole? Seeing nothing further, we will adjourn Committee of the Whole, and I'll turn things over to Chairman Schnetzer.
Thank you, sir. Colleagues, do you all need 5 or just want to plow right through?
I think we can go.
I'm fine, but I just got a computer restart notice.
Mr. Van Meter, give me a thumbs up. Okay, let's commence Finance Committee for November 25th, 2024. And just a quick recap. Unlike years past, where the entire budget is up for discussion every single Finance Committee, this year we've kind of agreed to take it a bit piecemeal, breaking it up into chunks via departments. So this evening, our focus is going to be the Planning Department, Economic Development Department, and the Mayor's Office. I believe we also have checking my notes, council office on here as well? Yeah, and council office as well. With that, does the administration have a presentation for us to
We
kind
do.
of guide the conversation? Okay, all right.
So we'll start this evening off with the city attorney, and then Clerk Van Meter will do their presentations.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. So just to follow suit with the administration's previous presentations, we have the same type of slide deck. And for the 2024 achievements, it's three main categories for my department. The first being ordinance review. These are all the various ordinances that I had reviewed and put before council. Mostly general offense and traffic code, the specific call-outs to distracted driving, discriminatory intimidation, and dangerous and vicious animal, which were the substantive code changes there. Also had a hand in reviewing and revising the zoning code penalty section, as well as an area of the backflow prevention code, which you saw in the Department of Public Services Water and Sewer Board ordinance. We tacked that on there because it's the same Chapter 9. Moving right along, we have prosecution. So the other major area of my office is to oversee all prosecution. We do have cases in Franklin County Common Pleas, Municipal Court, Gahanna Mayor's Court, and then Environmental Court. And we do also do special prosecution for other jurisdictions if there is a conflict of interest. I did have one of those this year, as well as fair housing mediation through our Fair Housing Code. We did have one complaint that was resolved in mediation this year. The environmental court section, sorry, just to give you guys an idea of what that means, is not only do we have criminal and prosecution there for animal code under state code, we also have nuisance actions. So when there are repeated code violations that are not being remedied in mayor's court, the new policy is to escalate that to a potential nuisance action in environmental court through Franklin County Municipal Court. So far, we had 2 potential cases for that, both of which have been able to be resolved without additional litigation. And then the last area is just code compliance and best practices implementation, reviewing public bodies and public record policies, as well as general policies and procedures for the administration, and all contract review that goes through the city comes across my desk as well. For 2025 priorities, obviously continued ordinance review, which is an annual area, and legal opinions as issues come up. Identify, implement, and recommend best practices to provide systemic due process protections in mayor's court. This is an area that is essentially things such as use of a public defender or more strategic and formalized diversion and community service projects, things of that nature. So those are all the types of things that I'm implementing in the law department and would possibly recommend for future implementation in mayor's court. Part of that process is to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible. And so one of the strategic choices that we made as a department and with collaboration with the Department of Police and the administration was to shift OVI prosecution from Franklin County Municipal Court to mayor's court. Which would generate, I believe, in excess of what funds would be necessary to implement something like a public defender available for citizens' use. And then lastly, identify and recommend uses for opioid settlement funds for the opioid remediation. My predecessor, Mr. Malarski, had entered the city into the opioid remediation, the settlement litigation. And we have added another litigation to that this year. And so there is some funding there that came along with those settlements that have a lot of restrictions with them that have to do with opioid remediation. And so one of my priorities for next year would be to try and identify and recommended uses for those funds. And then what's not listed here and also trying to implement is to try and reduce the amount of paper in our office. So in my department, we're trying to scan everything in that's been archived files, as well as try to reduce the need for moving over the law library to 825, as almost everything is now digital. The next slide is just the general expenditures, 22 actual, 23 actual, 24 appropriated, and then the 25 request. As Senior Director Vollmer had indicated earlier in the budget presentations, there was some shift of budget from my department to administrative services, which was related to insurance premiums and deductibles. Otherwise, the budget remains largely the same. And of course, we don't generate revenue in my department, so nothing on revenue.
Take a brief pause there. Council, anything for Department of Law?
Just to clarify,
Sure, Ms. Bowers?
if OVIs do generate additional revenue, is that reflected in the mayor's court's budget?
So because it is a new change that we're still working on implementation, that was not included in the projections of the mayor's court budget. They were projecting based on current trends. So we would see that reflected in actuals next year. And then my request would be to implement anything based on that in 2026.
Excellent, thank you.
Anything further, Council? Mrs. McGregor?
You have like $132,000 in contract services. Can you give us examples of what that's for?
Yes, so some contract services include contract prosecutor who helps with mayor's court, as well as a contract administrative services personnel who does file preparation and administrative help for both Mr. Roth and myself. She's also the one that's tasked with doing the scanning and becoming paperless in my office. The bulk of that contract services, however, is for outside counsel use for civil litigation, as well as consulting on any other areas that fall within a specialty.
Okay, thanks.
Council, anything further for Department of Law? Thank you, Madam City Attorney. Mr. Van Meter, over to you.
I'm up. So just by way of introduction, we don't have an org chart on the slide, but as you know, council office is staffed with 3 full-time personnel, clerk of council, myself, deputy clerk of council, and a management analyst for communications and research. Our primary function is to provide direct administrative support to city council, 7 members, planning commission, 7 members, BZBA, that's the Board of Zoning and Building Appeals, has 5 members, civil service commission, 5 members, Fair Housing Board, 3 members, Records Commission, 7 members, Property Appeals Board, 5 members, and every 5 years, a Charter Review Commission consisting of 7 members. So at any one time, we provide that direct support to 40 to 47 different members. So what is that direct support? That is agenda preparation, minutes, legal notices, legislation, budgeting, training and onboarding of new members, offboarding of members, internal and external communications, live streaming and tech support, various constituent services serving as liaisons between the residents of Gahanna and the elected and appointed legislative bodies, and the administration. Another main function of our office is to manage the city's records program. This involves creating record policies and procedures, coordinating with departments to fulfill public records requests, and supervising the retention and disposal of records. So as you all know, but for the viewing public, there is no single department or division within the city that our office does not touch. Our 2024 achievements, Sophia McGuire, we really focused on our professional development and onboarding of staff. Sophia was able to earn her credential known as the Certified Records Analyst, or CRA, through the Institute of Certified Records Managers. This certification requires passing 3 exams covering everything from information creation and use, record systems, storage and retrieval, appraisal, retention, protection, and disposition of records. Sophia is working on the next level designation known as the Certified Records Manager. As council knows, Sophia was able to present at the National Association of Government Archives and Records Administrators, Nagara Conference this year. The topic was Records Management Resurgence, using outreach, education, cross-departmental partnerships to revive or jumpstart a records program. And just as of note, there are less than 30 individuals in the state of Ohio with the Certified Records Analyst certification. So we are very fortunate to have that credential as an asset to our office. Next, we have Jessica Hiltz, Management Analyst for Communications and Research. She was onboarded this summer, continue to work towards developing a communications plan of best practices for internal and external stakeholders, not only for City Council as a body, but also for our office as a department of the city. Jessica is an experienced clerk and has former planning department experience from the city of Westerville. And she's working on developing an array of communication services such as website updates, newsletter content, brochures, and delivering on research requests from various members. Then, as you know, we had during the summer a MORPSI intern for policy research and records inventorying. Charlie had worked on auditing our deeds and easements files, identifying records on microfilm, researching the community reinvestment area records and inventorying and organizing that data, as well as helping us to implement our Ohio Historical Records Advisory Board grant. As you know, our office was awarded $3,000 for records preservation this year. That was spearheaded by Deputy Clerk McGuire. I do want to mention, as an office, we are members and take a very active leadership role in statewide and national organizations such as Ohio Municipal Clerks, the Society of American Archivists, and NAGARA. This year, our office also joined the 3CMA, the City County Communications Marketing Association, as well as the Public Relations Society of America to support communications and legislative research. Our 2024 achievements focused on our digitization, our modernization of our record systems. As you can see from the slide, we had several, this was part of our grant through ORAB. We were able to digitize 10 records books, about 300 pages each, from the 1880s when Gahanna was a village, up through the 1970s, and we aim to have all of the minutes through 1970 from the beginning as Gahanna Village on Legistar by the end of this year. So a tremendous leap forward in transparency and access to those early Village of Gahanna records. In addition to that, we've worked collaboratively with the Mayor's Court to identify 52 court dockets that kind of match that historical records preservation effort, and as well as 10 boxes of our permanent annexation. So we are working on getting those digitized and online. Lastly, under digitization, we have currently in process 91 boxes of permanent files underway to be digitized. Half of that was sent to a firm, I believe, late last week, and we plan to finish out the other half of that next year. But when you go into our basement, you'll notice there's a long hallway filled with several shelves of planning commission files. So these 91 boxes are what I'm talking about. Once we get those digitized, it will really help with our planning department, our own office to research various variances, design review, other historical information that the city has had with respect to our planning commission. Our plan for the physical asset is to then move them to our off-site facility so they're no longer taking up space. It's very affordable in terms of an off-site storage service and frees up more space for other materials that would be accessed more frequently than we would these. Another achievement for 2024 involves training. We conducted our first game day training with about 35 employees. This involved hosting a Records Jeopardy, some board games, file name face-off, and is it a record ball toss. So another way that we're trying to engage our staff and communicating the importance of public records keeping and disposition. We also began a process of meeting with individual departments to inventory records for the move to Tech Center, specifically meeting with records liaisons from engineering department and water and utility billing. And we continue to work with our HR department, Parks and Rec, and planning on troubleshooting various records management issues and disposals. Then the next slide, just wanted to give you an idea of our public records request. As you can see, from 2018 to 2024, steadily increasing. These numbers don't reflect the records requests that the police department has taken in. As you know, they have a separate records personnel that helps manage and coordinate those responses. I did want to note that probably within the last week, we did receive 10 more, so you can knock that up, about 10 more, that 253, meaning that it's one of the highest years that we've had in terms of records intake. And just to give you an idea, we do share next request, which anybody from home is welcome to get on gahanna.gov, go to City Council, and go to Public Records Request to make a request. But we do share that system with our police department, and as of today, we had 16,457 file records in that portal currently. So that doesn't give you an idea of the number of pages that we go through, but that does give you some sort of conception of the records that we manage just in terms of responding to requests from the public. We do work very closely with our city attorney's office because some of these requests are very complex and require some additional legal advice. In terms of priorities for 2025, like most departments, we're working on our own move to 825 Tech Center Drive, what that means for our office, our records management. We're also exploring ways to continue on showcasing our city's history with thinking about how do we develop a municipal archives to showcase what are the city government historical records and how can we get that story out to the public more. So that is a priority for 2025. In addition, as I mentioned, we onboard new commission members, new board and commissions. In 2024, we developed a manual of resources for each board and commission of the city. We're kind of hoping to step that up in 2025 as a training 2.0 with collaborating with the city's HR department to utilize the learning management system to convey more resources and training to our members. And then lastly, our communications plan for city council and council office. This involves identifying and implementing ways to promote and foster ongoing communications with residents to increase public awareness and participation in the business of council, boards, and commissions. Also looking at how do we utilize emails, newsletters, web presence, and content, events, and other avenues to advance those communications. Next slide is our expenditures. Not a lot to note in terms of difference from last year. We did request again a MORPC intern for 2025, and that position will be the same, 32 hours a week at the city's hourly schedule, which I believe is $15.99. And then what they're going to do primarily is project-based. One emphasis is to understand our city's Charter Review Commission, since in 2026 that commission will be convened. So we want to have a good idea of how that should function and kind of what the commission has looked at historically so that we can better support our members when that time comes to pass. Then lastly, we have our revenue slide. Believe it or not, we do have revenue that's classified in our department. Licenses and permits consists, I believe Director Burry had mentioned that our liquor permit application or fees for that.
Correct.
Correct?
The fees for liquor permits come in through
Fees for
council
liquor
office.
permits is categorized as a revenue stream for council office. And then the other miscellaneous would involve any appeals that are filed with our office.
Thank you, Clerk Van Meter. Council, anything for council office? Questions, comments, concerns?
I do have just a question on, so records, we're at 240, whatever you said this year. Like, I guess what's the measure? I mean, is that good? Is that we don't want a ton of them? Like, is there other data or other things that we have around the number of record requests or even certain topics or anything like that to understand?
That's a great question, great point. Within Next Request, we do have the ability to segregate in terms of what division or department of the city an individual's request might fall under. So we can capture that data. As Next Request is a new system, we're constantly learning new tools that we can use for it. Another way that we can further break down those numbers is looking at which of those requests involved a media request, whether it's 10 TV or whatever news channel or outlet, because sometimes those can involve a host of departments, whether it's police department, public information officer, and I can't really say if that's a good number. I just wanted to give you an idea that these are increasing. It's something that we are keeping our eye on in terms of staff workload. Right now, we are able to manage with what we have and provide additional support for departments, whether it's accessing records in the basement, those sort of things, to move along our records request so that we're able to fulfill them in a timely and prompt manner.
Okay, thank you.
Council, anything further? Seeing none, thank you, Clerk Van Meter. With that, believe we're shifting over to is it Senior Director Volmer. Are you taking the lead on this one?
Yep, got it. So the first department is planning. So in 2024, as you're well aware, the new zoning code was adopted along with a new permitting software. I believe we shared it before, but the Department of Planning and Engineering, along with the management analyst Kelsey Bartholomew's assistants, earned the High Performing Government Award from OpenGov at this year's conference. In addition, the department conducted over 4,000 inspections. In 2025, the department intends to continue the continuation of zoning code updates and then to conduct the initial review of the land use plan. The next slide has the planned expenditures for the planning department. And the following slide has a revenue. We did receive one question from the planning department about the residential plans examiner, if that's a new role or if it's a reclassification in a new role. The employee in that job did a job audit back at the end of 2023, and the city's consultant came back and indicated that that position should be a residential plans examiner, as that is what that employee was doing for the vast majority of his time. So that was added in the 2024 budget. And then last year we did hire that building inspector, or was in the budget for last year, and we did hire a building inspector this year as well. Are there any questions on the planning department?
Colleagues, anything for planning? Director Volmer, I just have one clarifying question. So according to my notes, we had two questions for Department of Planning. The other was there was an ask about the $300,000 for strategic land acquisition.
That's in the end at the Capitol. Because of the
Understood.
makeup of the departments today, the Capitol is all at the end today.
Okay. Thank you. Just want to make sure we didn't lose sight of it.
Yep.
All right. Colleagues, Department of Planning, going once, going twice? Okay. Moving on.
The next department we're going to go over is the mayor's office. In 2024, the mayor's office achievements, here's a brief summary of some of the items that were completed this year. So we created and launched the inaugural Gahanna Citizens Academy, completed design development and groundbreaking for the municipal complex. The capital improvement plan, ooh, my slide got messed up. That's supposed to say the design development, and we secured the city's AA1 rating. The capital improvement plan, we saw that take off this year as well. The implementation of Gahanna Energy Plus, the city's community choice aggregation program. We continued to move forward the Creekside redevelopment strategy. And then, of course, we had the large celebration for Gahanna 175 that was spearheaded out of the mayor's office this year. In 2025, some of the priorities consist of successfully completing our Gahanna by adopting a new strategic plan and economic development plan to guide the programs and initiatives for the city's future. Development of a continuity of, that word is hard for me to say today, of operations plan for all divisions of the city. Implement a mayor's advisory roundtable to strengthen relationships and obtain stakeholder input on issues impacting the business community. Prepare for transition of all city operations to 825 Tech Center Drive. And then to continue the evaluation of potential opportunities for this property here at 200 South Hamilton to maximize the ROI for the benefit of the city and its residents. I should have given you a preview of the agenda, I guess. So how we have this section broken down is the next section is marketing, communications, achievement, and priorities. So I just didn't know if there were any questions before I move on to that section.
Sure. Council, anything based on those handful of slides that we just saw? All right, moving on.
So the 2024 achievements for the marketing and communications team expanded communication channels with residents by developing new written newsletters to include in water bill inserts for those that get a printed water bill. Promoted digital accessibility by adding e-newsletters, meeting agendas, alerts for projects and initiatives and different timelines. Increased social media engagement by 1.6% across all platforms. Of note, LinkedIn was a 12.5% increase and Instagram was a 14.3% increase. about a 68% increase in impressions across all social media platforms, and 154% increase in social media engagement through posts and comments. And that was assisted by the addition of stories and reels to engage viewers across those platforms. In addition, the team created and published materials for various city initiatives, including the Gahanna Energy Plus, Gahanna 175, and the various Parks and Rec programming. In 2025, the Marketing Communications team looks to continue to identify opportunities to expand communications to reach a multi-generational audience, provide responsive communications and marketing to support city departments, develop overall communications and marketing strategies to support the business community, and then continue to build the citywide brand consistency throughout departments and everything that they're doing as well. The next two slides have the mayor's office expenditures. There is no revenue, so we can stop on this slide if there are any questions, and then the next part is the question portion from the mayor's office.
Council, anything on those couple of slides?
So we're going to circle back to the questions.
Yeah, they're coming up right now, right?
I have a couple of questions before we get there.
Do you want to wait till the questions, or do you have questions now?
We'll wait and listen. I'll wait and listen
Okay.
first.
All right, Director Vollmer, back to you.
So the first set of questions, Mayor Jadwin will provide responses to these.
So the first question concerns, please explain the role of the mayor's advisory panel. Boy, I'm reading this without my glasses. And was this included in the 2024 budget? If so, why is this a recurring ask? Are there any associated costs that were not used last year as a result? So as I've shared previously, the purpose of the mayor's advisory panel is really to help strengthen the connection between the city and our business community. The panel will function as a quarterly roundtable discussion with members, my office, members of our economic development team, and representatives from our businesses of all sizes throughout the community. There'll be an opportunity to gather their input, feedback, guidance on the needs and challenges that they are experiencing in doing business here in the city of Gahanna, and hopefully identifying maybe things that we could do better, things that we aren't doing, that we should be doing, everything from do we need a code change, what's the permitting process look like, workforce needs, helping with workforce needs, understanding their challenges around housing and transportation for employees, something we're hearing from our businesses now. Obviously, economic development is a partner or will be a partner in the mayor's advisory panel. So I've been working with the economic development team in shaping the framework for this panel. The map was included in the 2024 budget. Costs were relatively nominal, about $6,000, which were anticipated to be cost to cover any printed materials that would need to be produced or any expenses related to meetings. To the extent we have not used those dollars by the end of the year, those will be returned back to the budget. It is a recurring item because this would be an ongoing initiative and ongoing conversations with our business community.
Colleagues, any follow-up on that one? All right, moving on. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Badeau.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I understood that. So has this roundtable been formed yet, or it's still in the process of?
We're still in the process of
Okay.
creating the framework for it. Certainly, we have the economic development strategy also that's ongoing. That will be incorporated into the strategic plan. Businesses will be interviewed as part of that process. So as we continue to shape the framework for that, I think the framework for the panel will also be informed by that process.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ms. Jones.
So stakeholders, business community, not necessarily residents, unless there's overlap of resident
This
and
would
business.
be strictly for businesses.
Okay.
Understanding as, whether it's a small business, a minority-owned business, medium-sized, large-sized business, what challenges are they seeing in the city? What do they need to continue to grow? We, as part of economic development, we do proactive business visits as well. So we're trying to understand, those visits are geared to understanding what our businesses are seeing, what their plans for growth are. That's how we've identified some of our development projects and listening to their plans. But this specifically would be geared toward what can we change within our city operations to better serve and serve our business community.
Colleagues, anything further? Mr. Weaver.
It's just a brief comment. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mayor, for the clarification and the additional information. I think just to piggyback off Ms. Jones' comments, I think whatever you can do to ensure that there's a broad representation of Gahanna's businesses included, and size, ownership.
That's the goal.
Yeah, I think that's important, so just appreciate that effort.
Thank you.
All right, colleagues, Mayor's Advisory Panel, any final questions or comments? All right, Director Vollmer.
This one's mine as well. Can you provide an update on the workshops with community partner organizations? So as a refresh as to the purpose of the workshops, for those of you who've been involved in Gahanna for many years, you probably have heard somebody in the community at some point talk about the fact that Gahanna is a siloed community. We have historically, we've had many wonderful organizations that work very hard to make an impact in our community, but we don't always necessarily historically have worked together. And I've heard many people say at various times, if we could just get our oars rowing in the same direction, we'd be that much stronger as a city. So that was the purpose of starting these workshops. They're holding them with nonprofit organizations in the community. We started with Visit Gahanna, the Gahanna Area Chamber, Economic Development in the city generally, because those are the entities that have the most overlap in terms of their mission and function, the audiences that they reach. And then those grew to kind of the next tier of organizations, and we still have another tier beyond that that we've not yet gotten to. But based on feedback from the organizations that had participated, they have found it to be very valuable. In some of our sessions, we've had some of the organizations state that they didn't even realize some of these other organizations existed, identifying opportunities for them to work together and collaborate, which was the whole goal of what we're doing. So we actually have our next meeting next week, and one of the initiatives that's coming out of that is the creation of a community calendar. Because as a city, we certainly have a calendar of events on our website, but we are limited in what we really can and should be promoting. So having a community calendar that every nonprofit organization in the community can access to promote their own fundraisers and volunteer opportunities, ask for help, promote their own events, and it's kind of a one resource for the entire community to go to that can tap into things that we necessarily can't. Is already one of the takeaways from the workshops that we have. So we'll be talking about what that looks like in our meeting next week. But we look to those to continue in 2025.
Thank you. Mayor, I appreciate the insight into this. A couple of follow-up questions. One is there a metric to determine success? How do we know that this is performing and doing the job? What is the goal? And I've heard you speak about making sure that folks kind of are rowing an oar in the same direction, but how do we measure success? And number two is, my understanding is that this is being facilitated by an outside consultant, and that the city is paying for that outside consultant?
Correct.
And is there any contribution from any of the partner organizations?
To date, there has not, but that has come up recently in conversations in terms of whether or not the other organizations want to see this continue. That was a question that I posed, is whether they saw this to be valuable. And I know Chamber and the Visit Gahanna in that particular meeting expressed that they both thought it was very valuable, and both organizations voiced interest in contributing to that. And actually, I think that's part of the conversation we need to have next week, because this was not intended to be an ongoing paid facilitation. It was to get people around the table. And to answer your question about measuring success, I think it's seeing an increase in collaboration amongst the organizations, certainly any kind of initiatives that we can implement for the community overall, where we have buy-in from all of the groups, would be certainly success for everyone in the city. But I think to your question about cost, that is something that will be discussed next week.
So what's the current budgeted line item?
It's
for
been
the facility?
less than 10,000.
And is that projected for 2025 as well?
I don't, I think I added a minimum or maximum amount of, I should say, maybe 5,000 to finish out as we transition. The goal would be to not have ongoing facilitation, but to have the organizations themselves agree to meet on a quarterly basis, and for them to discuss what they see as success through this. So that is what we've been working toward in the framework of conversations we've been having, to get buy-in from the organizations themselves.
And have there been any like surveys or metrics, audits performed yet to gauge feedback? I appreciate that you shared some qualitative responses just from what they've said, but have there been any other tools or assessment tools that have been utilized for this group yet?
Not thus far, no.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Council, any other questions regarding community partner workshops? All right, Director Volmer.
The next set of questions are for marketing communication. On page 64, what is the driver of the increase in contract services? And Director Burry is going to take that one.
So just as an overall, the total amount of contract services on there needs to be reduced by $100,000. So the $100,000 for the community grant, we were determining where it needed to fall. We eventually put it under Department of Administrative Services, and the account was changed, but the department was not. So there's $100,000 in there. So it's really not an increase from last year. It's actually a decrease of about $11,000.
Just to clarify, so page 64, contract services, it shows the book, which I understand now is in error, shows an increase of 88,525. You're saying we should pull 100 out of that because it's been allocated, I think it's actually to the finance department based on
Correct.
prior meetings. Okay.
Yes.
Council, any questions regarding that particular item? Contract services in the mayor's office?
I guess just, Mr. Chair, so what is the 100,000 for in
It's the
financing?
community grant
Oh,
program.
wonderful, okay, gotcha.
So it's in here now, but it's somewhere else.
Correct.
Okay.
The account is correct under finance. It's just when these tables were created and we're kind of determining where that should land.
Okay.
The account was updated,
So
but
then
the
the
department was not.
2025 request should be 267,000.
Correct.
Okay.
Just to follow up on that, Director Burry, is the table for finance correct? Does it include that 100,000?
So the table would need to be increased there by $100,000. But all the account level informations, like the appendix in the back, the actual appropriation ordinance,
Okay.
those are okay.
Okay.
It's just when these tables were built.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you. Council, anything further? All right, back to you.
The next set of questions are about line items from the marketing communications. So what is included in the $12,000 for the new resident packet? This includes dollars for graphic design to design the packet, printing, and then the related materials, such as the branded folders and the information that would go in the new resident packet.
Council, any questions on the new resident packet? All right, seeing none.
Please provide the details of $15,000 associated with the podcast and how that fits within the city's communication plan. So the podcast is to seek to expand communication channels. So podcasts typically have a different audience than social media. So this is to reach other audiences. It's part of marketing for the city for a business attraction and workforce. It's anticipated to be a bi-monthly podcast.
Council, any questions or comments about the podcast?
Do we really need a podcast?
Yes, we do. We're actually behind the curve with it. There are many municipalities that use them, but one of the questions that's in here talks about marketing and marketing the community for business growth and attraction. Has far greater reach than social media, typical social media platforms. They're a way to provide resources, connectivity, highlighting businesses, sharing information on programs. They're very, very valuable. And I know we also have Tia Ramey, our communications manager, who can speak to, I think I would call it the multi-generational dimensions of our communications, recognizing that we are a very diverse community and people get their information in a variety of ways. And in fact, I was in one of our staff members' offices today, and she said, "Did you listen to the podcast on da-da-da-da-da?" Because that's how she gets all of her information and she gets her resources. So there's generations that want this in their hands. They want something written, and there's generations that want it all digitally in other ways. So I do believe it's important and critical that we have that opportunity.
Ms. Bowers?
I don't know that I'm going to be able to ask this correctly. So I'm an avid consumer of podcasts. I absolutely love them, but I've never listened. I'm going to pick on Mayor Joe. I've never once listened to Mayor Joe's podcast because I don't know how it would relate to me. And so I guess the question that I have is, how are you going to distribute it in such a way that it reaches people, that it actually makes sense to listen to? How does it get into their hands?
I'm going to let our communications manager speak to that.
Thank you, Councilwoman, for your question. So one of the reasons why we've been taking a multi-dimensional approach to our social media efforts is because we do want to increase engagement. We want to make sure that we have a multifaceted way that we are reaching people. So I do believe that we have now built that foundation for our social media channels. We do have our new digital person that's also starting on Monday. We're really excited about that because now they can take that push with engaging with residents and comments even further. So to answer your question, we will be distributing the podcast through those distribution channels as well as our email newsletters, which also has a pretty great retention rate for how we're engaging residents as well. And very hopeful that this will increase the quality of content that we're providing on social media.
I really appreciate the context that you shared, but I don't think I heard an answer to my question.
You're saying how are we distributing it?
Correct.
Through
right.
social media, through our social media channels. So,
But if the people that we're trying to reach aren't being reached through our social media, how does a podcast on social media get to those business leaders?
well, that's one of the questions we have for our YouTube channel. So what you see in the budget is the ability to produce the podcast. That is something that we would be increasing and expanding our YouTube channel for, to upload that content there. We can also upload that content on the social media channels. So it's a robust search engine for quality content. I think the most important thing is how we are engaging through the content that matters and why it's different than our social networks.
If I could also add too, I follow Small Nation's podcast religiously. Small Nation, Jason Duff from Bell Fountain has been lauded for their development and what they're doing. They speak nationally. He routinely has local business owners on that talk about why they invested in their community, the support that they get from their community, opportunities for growth, opportunities to engage residents. So that podcast comes in an email that says, here's our weekly podcast. So there are multiple ways that we can share that. I don't know if you, Councilman, watch that. But not only posting it on the website, posting on social media, sending it out via our email distribution. If people want to listen to it, there are a multitude of ways that podcasts get disseminated. This is the same way you listen to. How do you get your podcasts when you listen to them? Would be very similar.
Yeah, most important ways is that we'll be leveraging YouTube Shorts, Facebook Reels, Instagram Reels. That's usually what we'll do is we'll splice the podcasts up into several small pieces so that way the content is being consumed through micro messaging.
I guess, can I ask a follow-up as well? Just, I think it fits in here well. Has there been discussion about both increasing accessibility in terms of being able to reach people with various disabilities, and also translations for diverse languages?
Mm-hmm. I think the ADA compliant issues, first of all, is a priority for us. As you know, we just introduced a new website last year. So talking with other municipalities around how they're addressing that is an ongoing conversation. And that is something that I'm going to look to Director Schultz as well, because I know we have had conversations on how we need to be addressing that in the future. There's nothing in the budget for that right now, because I think we have to understand what it is we need to do to make those efforts first. Director Schultz, is there anything you want to add?
So one of the things that we have done that has taken a bit longer than we would like, but it's out of our control to a degree, is we've asked our Civic Plus partners, the software folks, if you would, that produce our website materials for an ADA compliance type report. The exact name is escaping me. Just got that delivered. This is a conversation that Ms. Jones and I have had. I think it was last week, to be honest with you. It's an unread email in my inbox at the moment. But it's basically a report that indicates exactly how compliant or non-compliant our website is. They were supposed to have done the main website, so anything that's produced through Civic Plus itself, and then a couple other platforms that we also utilize. Civic Plus as an organization or a company, they're actually the engine behind a lot of what it is that we utilize. Next request that Clerk Van Meter spoke about during his presentation, that's actually a Civic Plus product, right? So they, as a big organization, should be ADA conscious. However, until you've had some of these sites reviewed, you don't exactly know how compliant or non-compliant they are. The other example that I'll give, and some of the other examples that have been given before this podium, are things like Granicus, the agenda, meeting minutes and agenda software that, or web content organization tool that we utilize for these meetings. How compliant is it? How compliant is MuniLink, which does our water and sewer bills, right? So this isn't just a one hitter when we talk about ADA compliance, because when you look at our website, the goal would be that it's one thing to the average resident, but it's many things in content creation in the background. So it is a complex issue, and one that a variety of people touch, but it's not necessarily a specialty of any one of us.
Just by way of editorializing, it would be my inclination, I think that should be a priority, and it sounds like that's already something that's being worked on, but in terms of how we utilize staff time, to me, that would be a priority in terms of accessibility.
Correct, and that'll also lead to IT projects and other resources before you folks to do certain upgrades and such, because it's not going to be there are some companies out there that we utilize that aren't as conscious of these things, and we'll have to make hard decisions as to whether or not we're moving platforms and those types of things. So again, that's all part of the assessment that we'll end up doing. That has started, I don't even know, Ms. Jones, when we had that last conversation, it's been a minute. But when we get some of these resources in, those are the assessments that we'll do.
And that will obviously, as Director Schultz said, impact council's office with Granicus and those mechanisms as well. So I'm sure as we both continue to move forward, both council office and the administration, there'll be opportunities for collaboration on that.
So Ms. Jones has been very patient, and
Thanks.
then Mr. Weaver.
Yeah, so I guess a couple questions, and also, maybe thoughts around podcasts. So also avid podcast user. My day job does do one. We have found that, well, with the increase in LinkedIn and podcasts kind of go hand in hand. So consider that an opportunity, but also internally. So for development of associates, instead of coming to a class, do you put something into a podcast? So as you're thinking about development opportunities, podcasts could be an opportunity. But I guess my question on the 15,000, so is that for like startup cost of equipment, understanding that podcast take a lot of time and money? Again, example, my day job, we bought all the equipment to do it in-house to not spend the cost. So like, what is the 15,000 for, and then will that reoccur?
So right now, I would call this a trial year. It's 15,000 represents the production of 6 podcasts, so every other month. If we're finding value in that, because we did have a conversation around what does it cost to just buy the equipment? Is there a company here in town that we could make an arrangement with and go in and use their equipment? What does that look like? What does staff time look like? So I think we need to go through the process. Right now, utilizing a Gahanna business. Actually, we have a quote from a Gahanna business that would produce these for us for this first year. See what kind of response we're getting, see how effective they are, and then evaluate, does it make sense to continue this way or to maybe reevaluate a larger investment or a different investment that might be more efficient for staff use of time.
Okay.
Then I appreciate your suggestions as well as to LinkedIn. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Weaver, and then Mrs. McGregor.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So my first question was related to, was exactly Ms. Jones's, so thank you. But then Second point, Director, once you've had an opportunity to digest that report, appreciate any follow-up you can provide. I think it was just only a couple months ago when we had folks here in chambers commenting about some of the lack of accessibility in terms of Granicus, et cetera. So,
Correct, and that's what started the conversation between me and Ms. Jones.
yeah, so I do appreciate that and look forward to the follow-up, so thank you.
Mrs. McGregor?
Okay, so we do podcasts, what would you consider a success? Like, how many people, you can tell how many people listen, correct?
Listens, video views, if we're just speaking in terms of metrics, shares, shareable content would be a success. Most importantly, what I would believe to be a success is being able to expose our business culture community.
It would be like 5, 100, 200, I mean, what would be a?
Well, I mean, we would need to review the analytics based on our current following to see, you know, what is successful, but I would love to see at least 25% increase in our video opportunity. What I would like to see to be a first year, trial year, for video views.
Okay.
Video views.
But 25% of what?
25% increase of video views from where we are with our reels and stories. I mean, we had a pretty high number in the previous slide of where we are in terms of how our content is being digested. I would like to see that number increase by 25% more.
Okay.
Ms. Padova, and then Ms. Bowers?
Thank you. So I think one of you may have mentioned that there are other cities doing this. I know Mayor Joe in Reynoldsburg does this. Are there other cities that do as well? Have we talked to them about or kind of gathered information from other cities to see any tips?
Well, what I've seen from other cities they tend to go live. You know, I've seen Franklin County has done podcasting. I've seen Reynoldsburg does it quite a bit. But they tend to go do live videos. That is not what this is. These are not live podcasts. These will be recorded and then spliced and distributed through our social media channels.
Would there, is there a benefit to do a podcast rather than just using live services?
There is a benefit to it. One of the benefits is just paying attention to our current stats of what's successful for us on social media, just because we've spent the last year experimenting with short-form video content. That's been very successful in terms of ingesting the information. So if we wanted to measure it by, you know, how long someone is watching something, people may not want to watch something for 25 minutes anymore. We notice that those trends tend to change, where what is successful in listening or even video views is about 5-6 minutes. But if we can take a 20-minute recording and splice it into 6 different videos so that we can ensure the content is being digested, then we have more likely chances of people getting the information that we want them to have if we're giving it to them in short form, especially since that's been successful for us in the last year, or the last 6 months, sorry.
Okay, so I am a millennial, but please excuse me if I'm understanding this incorrectly. But you're talking about doing 6 podcasts where I would get that on the podcast app, correct? Or are we talking about something completely different?
Right now we'd be leveraging our YouTube channel, so it's not like you'd be subscribing to Apple or Google. It would just be leveraging the YouTube channel and uploading the video content there.
So just like you can go back and watch council meetings for the last
Yes.
4 years
So it
via
would just be
YouTube, it would be
videos.
posted on there and live there.
Okay, so this is not at all what I was thinking in my head. Thank you. I think that's all for me right now.
And you mentioned Upper Arlington also does them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Bowers, did you have?
Just very, very briefly, I know that the threshold is well below what you would be required to seek an RFP for, but did you seek bids from various companies?
We did. We sought three quotes, which is consistent with our process.
Okay.
And the one that we went with, which was the lowest.
All right.
Well, would go with if we were to do this.
All right, thank you, Mayor.
Council, any?
Sorry,
Yeah,
one more
Ms.
thing.
Jones.
Sorry. I think I can't speak for others. I think it would be helpful, I know this isn't a budget question, but communications, it would be helpful future, just council report outs. Like all of this increase in followers and podcast and things like that are new to us. And so I think as we maybe if we have reports next year, when it comes this time next year, and we have questions about budget from a communication standpoint, it would have been helpful to kind of see the journey. So maybe just something to consider for next year of, just updating us on all of these new and different and just current state things that we're doing in the communications bucket would be helpful for me at least.
Sure, and I know there was, in some of the achievements that Director Vollmer just went through, there was some numbers in there with regard to our
Yeah.
engagement percentage increases, et cetera. So certainly as we look to what we want to do next year, I think having the before and the after, or current and proposed, would be helpful for everybody.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Nothing further? All right. Moving on, Director Vollmer.
Next question is, what is included in the $20,000 crisis communication amount? Could these responsibilities be absorbed internally? So this $20,000 is something that's budgeted each year. It's an emergency fund for when assistance is needed from an outside consultant for something that is specifically urgent or some type of an emergency event that either that internal staff can't handle, or it's something that's not within their wheelhouse. For example, when First Amendment protesters were coming around, right, we saw an outside consultant and a crisis communication firm to assist us with how do we handle these, right? It's for items that are essentially not planned. It's like the most basic definition of crisis communication is like something is literally on fire and we need assistance communicating out, whether that's internally to residents, both. It'd be for one of those type situations that's urgent and an emergency.
So not always used.
No.
Council, anything further on that particular item? All right, seeing none.
On page 61, has consideration been given to live streaming on Facebook or Instagram Live? No, the answer is no. YouTube is the largest streaming service available online, and so for meetings such as these or the interviews and podcasts that Ms. Ramey was just talking about, we would continue to use YouTube for those.
Council, any questions, comments on that one?
Yes.
Yeah, Ms. Padova. Sorry. Lean back,
I'm trying. So I asked this because I know a lot of people will get the agendas emailed and things like that. But depending on how the notifications are set up, like people get an actual notification whenever something goes live. So I feel like that could possibly reach more people when we're having the different like town halls that have been streamed over the last couple years, and any council meetings, planning, whatever. So if people were able to, instead of just like following us on Facebook and seeing the things that we post, if they got a notification that said City of Gahanna is going live, they might be more inclined to click in and listen and maybe be a little bit more inclined to listen and follow along. So I don't know how much more, what technology that would be required, if that's ever been looked into.
So the current stack that sits over next to Mr. Van Meter is capable of doing the things that you're talking about from a technical standpoint. I think it's as easy as, I think that if residents want to consume our content on YouTube, it's just a question of subscribing to our YouTube page, and then they're going to get that same similar notification that they would get in Facebook, that hey, we're going live kind of thing. So I think that if you're engaged with agendas and newsletters and even some of the content that gets produced in this particular forum, you most likely are subscribed to our YouTube page. I'm not 100% sure how many subscribers we have on our YouTube page, but it is relatively low. What I would say is to continue to push them like we do in a variety of different ways to our YouTube page. I know that when we publish the agenda on Facebook, I think we know what those metrics of that interaction are, but then there is also a link to the YouTube page, and we make sure that we're very consistent in that messaging, which I think is the best way to get somebody to consume our stuff. So. That would be my opinion. I think that YouTube, yeah, is like Director Vollmer said, the largest producer of video content out there that you could utilize.
So if the capability is there, what would be the downfall of using it?
I think that in some instances, we need to understand the output that's going out, and whether or not that has and sorry, I've got to put on my IT hat for a second. Whether or not that causes a technical hiccup with what it is that we do, I think fairly well in this room. I know that there are times where, we can't be failure free. I know that there are instances where we have had, meetings hiccup, if you would. There's the possible negative output from the current equipment that we have, and we'd have to explore it, we'd have to test it, we'd have to understand how to do those things. And I think that with what's on the current plate, it's not something that we've looked into. I know that we've answered this question in other conversations that we've had, and it's never been I don't believe it's ever gone to the IT department and or even past my desk as to a burning need or desire to do this. So resources haven't been utilized to go and test and do a variety of different things that we would need to do to make sure we don't have a negative impact on our ability to stream things.
If I can address my concern just from the communications and personnel from our department is that expanding our platforms might make it much harder for us to manage comments and responsiveness. There may be several comments to manage, and I'm concerned that we may not have the manpower to address them all or to be as responsive as we could be during the live stream if we're streaming on multiple platforms. It's just more accessible, and we have a higher likelihood of being able to address those comments on one right now versus, if we go to Facebook and other platforms at a time. That's my only concern. I would like to see us be able to grow that right now as we have someone new that's starting to see how well we can manage that from a personal perspective.
Just to clarify really quickly, I think our comments are turned off on our YouTube stream, so we don't accept comments on our YouTube stream or in our meetings, just as.
Well, being unfamiliar with Facebook Live as an
Facebook
example,
Live
right?
would be
I don't
different. I
believe
think
that there's
that's your point.
maybe is there the ability to turn off comments on a live feed? I don't know the answer to that question. So there's obviously some technical things that we would need to have the ability to look into. If it's a burning desire, we'll put it on the list and we'll begin to schedule it. But we'd have to understand exactly what it was. Then this body would have to understand what it is. One of the reasons comments are turned off is because I think most governments have most forums like this have their comments turned off, and they're not able to be commented on for a variety of reasons. I think one of the things we talked about when we talked about crisis communications in the first amenders, right? We saw how social media was attacked by those folks. And then in certain other platforms and such, you almost invited, and that's tricky and challenging. We'd have to understand it a little bit better than maybe we do right here in this room tonight.
Let me clarify. My comment was not indicative of a desire for comments to be turned on or off. I think as a point of clarification, we're not managing comments on YouTube because I think appropriately so, the comments are turned off on that platform. So that's
Correct.
purely the comment.
Gotcha.
That's all.
Just to follow up on this item, I don't know, Clerk Van Meter, if you'd be the most qualified to answer this, any sort of records maintenance concerns with streaming on multiple platforms?
So archiving social media is a problem. I don't know that with Facebook, we are connected through our city's Facebook page with a Civic Plus product. It's called Archive Social. That contract is through marketing. I think it's either IT or marketing. I can't remember which now. So it basically takes daily snapshots of what is posted on the pages and how they are dynamic and can change over time. So all of that is currently captured. I don't know how that functions with live video streaming, but I assume that comments within their certain screen capture would be captured. And then our social media archive is on the retention schedule as well. So there's a retention period for that. The problem is That's great for our archive social, but then actually managing it, what's out there online in terms of Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever it's been posted social media wise, can be challenging.
So this would be another item that would need to be presumably.
It would need to be
housed.
looked into.
Council, any other questions regarding that particular item? All right, seeing none.
The 12 social media accounts that the city manages, we have 5 Facebook accounts, 3 X accounts, 2 Instagram accounts, a LinkedIn, and a YouTube.
X, formerly known as Twitter.
You got it.
Okay. You said there's 3?
2. 3, yes. The city, Parks and Rec, and police.
Okay.
So what are the 5 Facebook, if I may?
The city, Parks and Recs, PD, Creekside, and Gahanna 175.
Creekside Gahanna page.
It was, I believe that page was it was a page that I think the Alliance had managed.
No, it was started by the city back in Nell Juris started it when she was here.
Gotcha.
She had the Creekside Gahanna page. So we've been having conversations with, at some point, we had conversation with Creekside District Alliance because they wanted access to it, so we gave them access to it as well for a limited period to post things and help promote Creekside. But then ultimately, we manage that page.
Right, because I believe the last edits that I made to the permissions on that particular page was their request to be removed from it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Council, any further questions on that item?
Can you repeat what was after the 3X?
2 Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube.
Thanks.
All right, Director Vollmer, back to you.
The next section is administrative services, so we broke this out as well. So for the 2024 achievements, mainly in the risk and safety categories, that was a new position that was added for 2024. Implemented a CDL training program. That's an in-house program that meets federal regulations. Increased training of city staff on first aid, AED, and CPR. Installation of 9 outdoor AED cabinets at athletic fields is in process. Increased hands-on equipment training, distracted driver training, and confined space training. We onboarded 2 new employees this year, the administrative coordinator and the management analyst for grants. And then we did hire a benefits consultant to begin the review of our employee benefits. For 2025 priorities, we intend to continue with the employee health insurance and related benefits by RFPing all lines of coverage with our partners at NFP at the beginning of next year. Update chemical inventory by conducting audits, conducting job hazard analysis for all city positions, and then implementing the software system for property and liability insurance, and then I missed a bullet there again. Updating the emergency action plans for all city buildings, including the new municipal complex. There were some questions related to the Department of Administrative Services. So on page 62, has the city observed any ROI in the management analyst 2? Has the city received any additional grants as a result of this position? So the management analyst 2 position has been filled for approximately 100 days. That employee is working through onboarding and training processes with Senior Director Weibensinger. That employee has been meeting with staff to understand different departmental needs, funding needs, and outside funding entities for introductions and discussions on opportunities. That employee also has attended multiple different trainings on how to find grants, apply for grants, and do those different things. So I have more information if there's more information, but the employee has been here for approximately 100 days. So,
Council, anything on that item? Director Vollmer, back to you.
page 62, prior to ARPA, has the city ever offered grant funding to nonprofits? If so, how was it funded? We did fund grant funding to nonprofits through the CARES dollars as part of the COVID recovery dollars in 2020. So the only grant programs we have had to nonprofits came from COVID recovery dollars, which are federal funds.
Council, anything further on that item?
Just as a follow-up, if you don't have the information here tonight, I'm happy to get follow-up. Has there in the past been specific earmarked any type of tax dollar funding to, not through necessarily a grant program, but a direct fund to nonprofits? I know, for example, there's been land to the YMCA, or I guess, are there other examples of nonprofit funding in Gahanna?
I'm not aware of any.
No one-time line items to GRIN or anything?
Not since I've been here. We host activities like donation drives where employees can bring items in, but no, we have not used tax dollars for any type of donations or grant programs since I've been here.
Social service support programs? Okay, all right, thank you.
We did, if I could say. When they built the memorial at the high school for the students, or the students who had been killed in the service, there was, I think we gave them a grant of $1,000 at that time, when it was the architectural students were raising the money for the memorial in front of the high school, and we gave them like $1,000.
All right, thank you.
That's all I remember ever before. That would have been early.
Was that to the schools?
Yeah.
So another political entity?
No.
No?
No, it was
To the
just.
district, or?
I don't know how they ran the funding. It was designed by the architectural students, and they kind of led the fundraising, so I don't really know. I don't remember.
Colleagues, anything further? All right, Director Bowman.
We've talked about the training coordinator various times throughout the budget process, but I did want to show it. It is 50% funded out of administrative services, and we report there. So the org chart here shows it is listed on a priority too, and it shows that it would report up through the Senior Deputy Director of Administrative Services.
Thank you. Council, anything on that item? All right, please continue.
The next department we have is Economic Development. For 2024 Achievements for Economic Development, they supported business attraction and business growth. So up there on the slide has a few examples of that, with the opening Orthopedic 1, new construction there at Burns and Scalo, and then the business expansion with Crocodile Cloth. In addition, the strengthening of the collaboration with partner organizations to identify and enhance opportunities for business growth and support, and made process improvements for CRA tracking, reporting, and accountability. For 2025, the department intends to complete the refresh of the 2015 Economic Development Strategy as part of our Gahanna Strategic and Economic Development Plan, moving forward the Creekside redevelopment, continued work to identify opportunities for business attraction and expansion, and then assisting to strengthen the talent pipeline to support local businesses and current and future work needs. The next two slides are the expenditures for the Economic Development Department, as well as the revenue. There's a variety of questions submitted for economic development, so that is the next couple slides that we have.
Council, anything further for those handful of slides? All right, please continue.
So the first set of questions, Mayor Jadwin will handle, and then the second set of questions deal with the questions related to staffing of the Economic Development Director.
It's getting late. I now need my glasses to read this screen. So please describe the department's relationship with the Creekside District Alliance. So currently, the Creekside District Alliance, which is a 501c3 organization, also referred to as the CDA, it started somewhere between 2016 and 2019, because I was on the original board for it. Right now, they're going through a transition. Their existing board members are evaluating what that organization needs or can be in the future, how they best fit within the fabric of the Creekside District. Because of that, the CDA approached the Economic Development Department and asked the Economic Development Department to assume responsibility for managing the CORA, the Creekside Outdoor Refreshment Area. That was, Director Hammonds was still here when that happened. We actually agreed that that would probably be best because the CDA felt that they were really capable of handling that at the time, given their limited capacity. So the Economic Development Department has taken over oversight of the CORA. And since then, they've already implemented some new processes and streamline the processes for cup tracking, cup ordering for the participating businesses as well. So right now, that is pretty much the extent of the relationship between the Economic Development Department and the CDA. I guess more will be to come once they figure out what their future plans are. And in the meantime, our Economic Development Department is working with Marketing and Communications on promotion of the CORA, so that certainly when we kick off in the spring, we'll be ready, but perhaps even some marketing through the winter season and the opportunities around utilizing the CORA during the winter months as well.
Council, anything further on that item?
Speaking of the CORA, will it be expanding? So next year will be the 5th year since the CORA was established. It is due to come before council for renewal. So just to make sure that we are just doing everything at one time, we will be seeking a slight expansion of the CORA with the success of the Creekside Boutique Hops that have been presented by the Fable Collection. There has been some challenge because the CORA actually does not include that area where those boutique hops are held, and they've had some challenges with people carrying their CORA cups, and they have to explain that, no, you're not in the CORA, and so just to make it easier and help with that event that continues to grow in popularity, we will be seeking an expansion of the CORA boundary to the north to include that section, and then also seeking to just adjust the operating hours. Right now, they change on the weekends versus the daytime, so the participating businesses have asked for uniformity and consistency for their own staff, so if we just make them 11 to 11 every day. So we'll be seeking an adjustment for that in the new year, probably Q1 of next year, so that will be ready to go for the spring when all the events kick in at Creekside.
Council, anything further on that item?
Is there any cost associated with any of this?
No.
Thank you.
Is the city's incentive portfolio, CRAs, O&I, et cetera, competitive compared to other central Ohio cities? If not, why not? And what could be done to enhance the city's toolkit and competitive position? So I would say on this question, this is an area of opportunity for us. It's one in which we are maybe not as best positioned as some other communities. A main component, what I would say is, having worked in the economic development space, even on the periphery, and then talking with our economic development directors and other economic development professionals, I think the lack of clarity around our school compensation agreement is a recurring theme that we hear with that. So trying to work toward, in partnership with our district, toward an agreement that maybe has more specificity and clarity, I think would be in the best interest of everybody, and we will continue to try to work toward that goal.
Council, anything further on that item?
I guess as a follow-up,
Ms. Bowers?
I'm glad to see this question. It wasn't mine. But as far as a review of the incentive portfolio, so I think this has identified CRAs, the O&I. Would that be a strategic goal of the incoming economic development director?
I would actually say that with our strategic plan underway and the economic development refresh strategy built into that strategic plan, that is something that they will be looking at, they being the consultant, and looking at our incentives, what we offer, what other communities offer. So I think that will actually be very informative for us on identifying areas where maybe we can create something new or that we have room to grow. So I expect that to be more of a takeaway from the economic development strategy.
That's great to hear, and I think just as a reminder, something that I've heard for years is that we have a significant number of pre-94 CRAs, and so I'd be very interested in getting that baseline, making sure that we understand where we fall within the region, why we're using those, and is there an opportunity to refine our toolbox to look at a better tool that could suit us?
Well, certainly with the growth that we're seeing in the region, there is going to be a lot of competition, and understanding how we stack up, so to speak, to our neighbors, especially within this region, I think is going to be primary for us. So I'm looking forward to having, I mean, a member of the Economic Development Strategy Refresh team is Julie Colley, who was an Economic Development Deputy Director at Westerville for many, many years. She's a very well-respected economic development professional, so she is a part of the Planning Next team who will be leading that. So I look forward to hearing the conversations and the feedback that she can elicit as we continue to move forward over the next year.
Thank you.
Anything further from council on that item? Madam Mayor, just
Sure.
so on the topic of the strategic plan and economic development strategy, what's your best guess for, I guess, the output that the city would receive from Planning Next with regard specifically to this item? It sounds like you had identified that, according to my notes, the school comp agreement was maybe one of the hangups. How do you envision them advising us how to rectify that?
I'm going to look to Director Vollmer because I know she's been working specifically with them. Can you speak a little bit more to the conversations that you've had with regard to outputs?
Sure, yeah. The economic development portion of that strategic plan is just now getting started underway. So we are working to narrow down a business list to begin the business engagement that the scope of work and contract calls for. It calls for specific amount of businesses that Planning Next needs to engage. And so that is the first phase of that. Right now, they're just in data collection to gather all those different things. But similar to how the strategic plan would have goals and objectives that we will be working towards, that's what the economic development portion will have as well as looking at Gahanna compared to the region and different in similar sized cities as well. So that is still to be flushed out next year, and it'll come before you, in the fall time for that. But there'll be updates along the way. The economic development portion hasn't really. Well, it's kicked off. There hasn't been any outputs for that right now because they're just in the fact gathering phase. There's 2 sub-consultants working on that with Planning Next for the economic development strategy.
Just a minor clarification, if I may. So you would envision them producing some sort of, assessment of our toolbox?
Yes.
And then compare that to peer communities?
Yeah, it's part of their scope.
And then assuming we find that we're deficient, how do we go about changing that deficiency?
There'll be recommendations that will come out of that plan of how to enhance our incentive portfolio or different items to accomplish in order to enhance the incentive portfolio.
Okay. What if those recommendations are not 100% within our control?
Those are conversations we would have with the consultant before during the recommendation phase, and those types of items will come before this body before the plan is finalized.
I would also add an economic development director, I would assume would be very involved in those conversations and then taking whatever recommendations best fit our community and then presenting them to this council as Director Vollmer just shared.
Okay. Thank you both. Anything further from council on that? All right, please continue.
Next, please share additional details regarding the Gahanna Minority Business Enterprise Program. Is there a municipality this is being modeled after? What cost is associated with this? What could get in the way of this becoming a reality? So just to kind of level set, in terms of what the expectation is here, we're not looking for a formal set-aside program that would be funded. This would really be connecting with our minority business community, understanding the needs and challenges that they have, and I'm talking about minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses, identifying opportunities where we can coordinate and facilitate partnerships with them, relationships with them, understanding how we can best support them, given that we are a local government and remaining true to what our role is, our appropriate role as a local government. Essentially, we are a connector. I always say we play Match.com. So it's taking a business and leveraging our partnerships at the state, at the county level, and potentially beyond that, to marry the two together and create an opportunity for them to help support them, connect them with resources. understanding what they currently have and then understanding what we can do to augment that connectivity to best support them is really what we would be looking to do. So costs would be relatively limited. I would say that costs would cover materials, any printed materials, communications we would need to do. If we were to do an event in collaboration with some partner organizations to help connect our minority businesses with other resources, it would be those types of initiatives tied to that program.
When we have these late nights, any opportunity to have Marlowe's cheesesteaks delivered in here?
You know? Do they DoorDash?
Yes, they do.
I know they do. I'm thinking she's closed by now.
I know. Special request next time.
That's right. And we want, we want to keep a business like that in Gahanna, right? I mean, they are, cheesesteaks are going like hotcakes. I mean, they're expanding all over the Central Ohio area, but we want to keep them here. If they want to grow, we want to make sure they're able to grow here. So understanding what their plans are and how we can best support that and connect them with those opportunities is something that would come from this.
Thank you. Council, anything further on that item?
Now you made me hungry. Thank you.
Please continue.
Oh, is this last one mine too? The proposed budget references partnering with marketing and communications to help market the city. What costs would be associated with this, and what does this practice look like currently? So without being the Department of Redundancy department, I'll just reference some of the things we've already talked about this evening, talking about podcasts, talking about working together on promoting Creekside. But really, right now, marketing and communications and the economic development team meet on a regular basis to really look to how they can strengthen engagement with the business community, identify strategies for attracting new businesses. Is that ads in Columbus Business First? There's all kind of things that we can do, but it really includes analyzing the data that we have. For example, this past weekend, how many people were down there? Where did they come from? How long were they there? Talking to our business partners, getting data from them, and then leveraging the resources that both economic development already has and marketing and communications, and how do they marry those together. We are creating the framework for everything from business spotlights, utilizing our website and social media, producing materials that are then distributed to our businesses. A nice, when you go, mentioned that we do business visits, and you have a nice branded folder that has information on the city, everything from the school report to a city's funding report to opportunities for volunteering and engaging within the community. But all of those things that we can do, those touch points, to connect with our business community and then to share with other people outside of our community around the opportunities to do business here, is what that partnership looks like between those two divisions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Council, anything further on that item? All right, please continue.
The next set of questions deal with the economic development staffing. What is the status of the economic development director search, and what is the recruitment plan? Will the approach be different? Has there been consideration to putting financial resources towards the search? So currently the job is posted on the city's website. It just was extended for another, so it'll be a total of 30 days. We use recruiting dollars in excess of what we use for other city positions to purchase advertising with IEDC, OEDA, Ohio Means Jobs, LinkedIn. We've also advertised with other statewide organizations as well to assist with that search. The job is also on, we have a subscription to governmentjobs.com, which is the premier place to post any government jobs throughout the nation. So it is posted on there as well.
Council, anything on that item? All right, seeing none.
On page 90 is the planned decrease in contract services reflective of hiring an economic development director. If not, what's the driver of the decrease? The driver of the decrease is the one-time dollars that were appropriated in 2024 for the refresh of the economic development strategy.
Council, anything further on that item?
Sorry, I divided this out because this was one question, sorry.
Okay.
What the total cost for contract in the Montrose group, so the Montrose group is budgeted annually. It's budgeted for $60,000 for 2025, which is the same as what it was budgeted for 2024, which is about $5,000 per month.
Council? All right, seeing none.
And then on page 90 are the salaries and benefit figures, assuming a new director is hired in 2025. Yes, that position, all vacant positions are budgeted in the 2025 budget, including the economic development director.
Council, anything on that item? Just, I guess, is that full 12 months, or are you anticipating like a half year or something like that? What's the anticipated start date?
It's a full year,
Okay.
1/1.
I'm sorry?
It's January 1st, so it's budgeted for the whole year.
Mr. Weaver?
Thank you, Chair. Given the cost of the expenditures towards the Montrose Group, as I serve on the CIC, thanks to President Bauer's appointment, I gotten to experience some of the expertise from Mr. Green from the Montrose Group. I'm not on the inner machinations of the city on the day-to-day business. What could we expect from an economic development director that we cannot contract for with the Montrose Group or another entity? I mean, that's quite the cost savings, but I'm assuming we're missing a lot here. So what are we missing by not having an economic development director that a consultant cannot provide?
Knowing your business community, first of all. And quite frankly, you know, I have no doubt that the Montrose Group, if we were to continue to use them, will probably say we need to be paying them a little bit more. But even when we had Director Hammonds, we were using the Montrose Group. As we continue to do more and more complex economic development projects, having that additional insight and being able to talk to somebody who works in other communities, who understands what other communities are doing, is extremely valuable. We talked a little bit just a couple minutes ago around new incentives and upgrading our toolbox, et cetera. Depending on what the background is or will be of the economic development director we eventually hire here, you can always use additional insights and consultation for that. I will say the Montrose Group for $60,000 a year that's been a drop in the bucket to what they've helped us do here. The demolition grant that $380,000 that was just secured, we just applied today for a second one for about $212,000. That takes a great deal of knowledge that's very specific to that issue. Something that even Director Hammonds did not have, Director Strum did not have. So sometimes you need to be able to rely upon those outside experts in that field to help you accomplish those very specialized projects. So again, I think that the value of having the Montrose Group as a partner is only of benefit to the city and to what we're able to accomplish together.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Council, anything further on that item? All right, back to you.
Now we reach the capital section. Mr. Schultz says this is the quietest he's been all day, so I'm sure he's excited to move on.
Also know it's pouring rain outside, so I guess it can take as long as I'd like.
Yes, because it's going to be dark green for a while.
Sorry, I will not take as long as I'd like. Basically, two sections this evening, one of which you guys have seen on numerous occasions, but it's Section 8 of the equipment portion of the capital budget. Again, the full total ask for the equipment is $2.4 million. We've gone over all but $500,000 of this $2.4 million. Basically, I guess I'm sorry I have this revision slide, but basically all of the money, the majority of the money here, the 2.3 million of the 2.4 does come from the capital fund. And there's just one request this evening that we're looking at, which is, excuse me, and again, this is the last one, but this is for health and wellness equipment and furnishings for 825. Director Vollmer will do a much better job than me explaining exactly where this $500,000 comes from, so I'll turn it over to her.
So I think I spoke about it earlier, but the COHCC has been reviewing their excess reserve policies. So that's the dollars that are in excess to the required reserves per our policies and how to return those back to the entities who are performing well. The city of Gahanna has been performing well over the last 5-year period and the last 1-year period that they've been looked at. So we are receiving a dividend payment back from the COHCC in a form of a check at the beginning of next year. That money was spent and allocated for health and wellness and employee benefits. Therefore, it should be used for employee health and wellness and benefits. So a part of that dividend, we are requesting it to be allocated $500,000 for health and wellness equipment and furnishings. The remaining dollars for that dividend payment were used to assist in the cost for the OSU Wellness Center that employees use, as well as HSA contributions and the overall wellness programming that the city does.
Before turning it over to council, just a technical question. On page 115, is this the 500,000 that's listed actually under the finance department?
I believe it is,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, all right. Sorry, it just wasn't on my radar since I kind of kicked anything out that wasn't, topics today. But anyway, council, anything on that item? All right, seeing none.
So the next and final section that we have not gone over to date is Section 7 of the CIP, which is listed as city facilities. In here, there's actually a modification that we've made to this particular budget, which we'll go over in a minute. But the total request that we're asking for this evening is $450,000 in city facilities. Obviously, just as a note, right, that like 825 as an example is fully funded and capitalized already in 2024. So that's why this is obviously a relatively small number here. But city facilities, there are 3 projects listed on the next page. I will get into, you guys are aware of one, and then we'll get into what the other 2 are. I will make a note that in this particular slide, these are all the same throughout all of the different slide presentations that we've done so far. But you'll notice tonight that I actually add a category here called general fund. We'll get into the exact reasons for that next. But basically, we're looking to take $150,000 out of the general fund and then $300,000 for a total of $450,000 in this particular section. The 3 projects that we have identified, the first project on this list is the $300,000 that comes from the capital fund. This is it's listed in the document. We've had some conversations about potentially changing the name of this particular project, but Strategic Land Acquisition for Development. We had a lot of conversation last year in these chambers as it related to this particular item, but this basically is I think the number that we settled on last year was the $300,000 that's available to the CIC for their agreement between us and them, the city and them, to cover costs that are listed inside of that particular agreement. And forgive me, I'm not exactly sure to enumerate those at this particular moment. But I will pause there and look for questions on this specific item and then seek assistance from others in the room.
Council?
Not a question so much, but I think in the effort of trying to advance some dialogue and discussion, I support a more clear
Title?
description.
Sure.
And I guess the question I have is going back to, the Capital Improvement Fund was essentially established via the passage of Issue 12. And while city facilities, if we were to buy, let's say, vacant land, right? The service garage would be a perfect example. If we were to buy vacant land and then later develop it for the city's needs, I think that would certainly qualify to the average person out there. I guess the question that I have, and in some ways, I suppose it's rhetorical, in some ways it's technical, and if it's technical, I'm looking directly at you, Director Burry, is land for development, is that an appropriate use of the capital fund, or should that come out of the GF?
I think it's an appropriate use for the capital improvement fund. I mean, it's still an expansion. While the end result might be private development, it still is a benefit to the city overall.
Okay.
So I think it's fine being there. And the intent behind this is for the land bank program. So it's to take those blighted, rundown areas and make them into a betterment for the community.
And I suppose somewhat strategically, so I don't know if this is, Madam Mayor, you're the best one to answer this, the expectation is that we would recoup those funds at some point down the road, assuming that it's not for a city purpose?
I mean, ideally, that's always the goal. Every deal is different, but that is the goal, is to recoup those and then reinvest them elsewhere.
Thank you. Council, anything further on that?
Yeah,
Yeah, Ms.
sorry.
Bowers.
So I appreciate and thank you for refreshing me on this, because I had similar thoughts and I guess concerns that this 300,000 that's being allocated to the CIC really is to service existing land that the CIC is holding, not for acquisition and really not for capital improvement in the sense that I think we understand it to be, like, in terms of capital improvement for city-owned projects. I appreciate it, and there's my comments are not to reflect on whether or not there's a technical ability to use this funding in this way. I'll certainly defer to Director Burry on that. But from my perspective, I don't know that to me, I don't think that, one, it fits within the intent of what this fund was created to do. The other piece of this, Mayor, is that it's my understanding that, and I believe that our former Economic Development Director shared at a school board meeting, that we paid a premium for the land that CIC now owns. Or I should say the CIC paid a premium in order to aggregate the land. And so I guess I would have a concern that while maybe it's the goal for us to recoup that money, perhaps that's not going to happen based on what the former Economic Development Director shared at a school board meeting. And so I want to make sure that we're clear, I suppose, as a council, that we are likely not to see back this allocation.
Well, first of all, I don't know what was shared at a school board meeting by the director. I'd have to go back and listen to the comments, so I can't speak to that. Second, since we're in the middle of negotiations on a development agreement right now, I don't know that it would be necessarily appropriate to have a very detailed conversation about this. And maybe we could schedule an executive session and have a conversation. Because again, I don't want to do anything that would influence negotiations.
And that's not my goal. I guess my goal is, Mr. Schnetzer asked a direct question, and I guess I want to make sure that while I understand that there's a hope there.
If I may, just real quick.
Sure.
And it's just more color that gets added to the conversation, right? But there are other projects and other properties that the CIC may be holding that actually do have a direct benefit to the city and projects that we might be doing, and they're namely over in the Stigler-Agler area for Stigler-Agler 62 reconfiguration, right? So those properties are purchased and are in the CIC's portfolio, so that when we do go to design and do those things, that there is the potential for us to utilize and leverage those properties in order to, because they're already in the portfolio, in order to do those reconfigurations, so on and so forth. So at a time, but that is a direct benefit to that particular project, because if we would have to go in and purchase those properties in order to do that particular project, that is a direct benefit to that reconfiguration of that particular area and intersection. So I think depending on the project, you can make the case that, I'm sorry, just give me one more second and then you can go. That depending on the exact project, there could be a bigger benefit depending on exactly where the land that we're talking about is currently in the portfolio.
The tax bills for the properties that are owned on the west side pale in comparison to the tax bills for the properties that are owned in the Creekside area.
I moved on from that. I wasn't drawing a comparison between what we own at Creekside, or the CIC more appropriately owns at Creekside, versus what we own down on the west side. What I was trying to draw a comparison to was the use of capital dollars on in one particular area versus another.
So let me finish.
Sure.
So the tax bill that would come due to the CIC is largely going to be the cause of the property owned predominantly in the Creekside District. And the $300,000 allocation in the 2025 budget is not predominantly going to west side properties that could benefit the city in terms of a capital project down the road. I hear you, but for the purposes of what we need to do and the conversation that I think is the most fair, I think that we need to be really clear about what this $300,000 is doing.
And I don't disagree with you.
So so is the concern that the $300,000 is coming from capital versus GF? Is that the issue? Or just that there's $300,000 in the budget at all?
So I can't speak for Ms. Bowers, but my question was specifically the source of funding, yes. So again, thank you, Mr. Schultz, for the example of Stigler-Agler, right? If we were ever going to reconfigure that intersection, land, acquisition is obviously necessary. And because it's kind of well, it is explicitly for, traffic reconfiguration roads, I mean, hard assets that are, that reside solely in the public domain, I think that clearly would come out of capital. I guess where the lines get a little blurry for me is when we start to talk about economic development. Now, I know you can paint a lot of things with that economic development brush, including traffic reconfiguration. However, I'm thinking if you're just going in and buying a property with the intent of just reselling it so that it could be used for a higher economic purpose, that, to Ms. Bauer's point, maybe that doesn't fit with the spirit of the capital improvement fund, and that maybe the GF might be a more appropriate source. So very much to your point, Mr. Schultz, I think it depends on the project.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously no restriction on the general fund to be used in this particular fashion. Congruently, though, there's no restriction on the capital fund to be used in this fashion either. So I do think that the ask, whether it come out of GF or capital, I think is a valid ask, and I do think that.
Yeah, so I think for me, my comfort level would be more, one, we've already talked about retitling this.
Sure.
And number two, that it come from the general fund instead of the capital improvement fund. For me, if that would make more sense to me. As far as the $300,000 ask, it's standard with what we've done in prior years. I understand that we're supporting servicing these parcels. I think we all share the hope that we can minimize or change how we're using this type of funding going forward.
I don't disagree with you, and I think it's important to remember that CIC, the parcels that are currently in CIC's portfolio, whether they be on the west side, whether they be in the Creekside District or elsewhere, were purchased by CIC for the purpose of redevelopment opportunities for the betterment of the community. That's why CICs exist. So I understand it's taking a little bit longer than we had hoped. And I think it's everyone, including everyone on CIC's wish and hope and goal that be resolved sooner than later. I can say we are making progress. We've been talking about being on the 20-yard line for a while. I'd say maybe we're on the 5-yard line, maybe the 3-yard line, which can sometimes be the most difficult to get through. But we are getting closer and closer every day. Again, I think it's everybody's goal to get these parcels out of CIC's hands so that we can move forward with redevelopment. But I understand your concerns, and Director Schultz and I had the conversation earlier today about renaming this. Given the conversation that we had with council about a year ago here in terms of redefining what the uses of those dollars for CIC would be and incorporating that within the contract. I understand, and whether it's GF or capital, I will leave it to greater minds like Director Burry's and Councilman Schnetzer here. All roads lead back to Joanne. So.
But if it can come out of either, let me just sort of wrap this up. If it can come out of either, and we have identified that it is not going, this year's allocation, we acknowledge is not going to be used to purchase new property. I think that's the understanding.
I think we don't know that yet.
I mean, the contract has the ability, yeah.
They still run the land bank program.
Yeah.
I mean, if something does come up.
I guess I would like to get clarity from the CIC then, because I have discomfort with this being housed in capital if it's going to be used to service property taxes for the parcels that they already own. So I'll leave it there.
Sounds like this item needs to come back.
So if I may, real quick, I think, and I'll look at the mayor, but I do believe that the agreement between the annual agreement between the CIC and the city, we were going to check the term, and
Yeah, it'll need to come to the next committee.
Yeah. So we do have to bring the
We have to
it's
bring
more
the
about the
agreement
agreement than it is about the funding, in my opinion, right? What does the agreement say? What does the agreement say that the money can be used for is really what your question really is. So it's not really, in my opinion, and this is just obviously, I think it's not necessarily about the budget and the $300,000. It's about what the contract says the money can be used for, which is a separate action item.
Didn't we amend that? We've already
Correct,
amended
we've already,
that.
right, I would I would disagree. I think the issue is which fund it comes from.
Correct.
Because I think the contract already was amended to identify, and we had that, was December of last year when that amended contract was adopted. So,
I'm sorry, I guess I'm saying is that we need to look at the contract and know exactly what it
gotcha.
says in order to determine whether or not purchasing I can't sit here and say what we talked about last year in
No,
this
I
particular seat.
understand. I think that the contract, we sit here and we agree that the contract allows this money to be
Sure.
used either for acquisition or for the fee servicing related to the properties. Like, that has already been established. But for our purposes, I think that this is, I think that it matters where we house it, what fund it comes out of, and that does depend on how the CIC is using it. So perhaps that is a report out from the CIC on what the $300,000 was used for in 2024 and what they do expect to use it for in 2025, so that we have a better understanding of what fund it's coming out of. Does that make sense to my colleagues? Okay.
I suspect we'll see this one back next week.
I
I mean,
I still don't think I don't know that the fund matters, because the fund, whether it's capital or general,
hold on.
yeah.
We've heard from Joanne, I believe we all trust her, that technically it doesn't. So I want to be abundantly clear, this is a political question. What do we, as the appropriating authority, feel comfortable with? And I think we're asking, we want to know what is the intended use of the funds by the CIC. If they say it's for the maintenance of existing properties in Creekside, and you've got a dollar amount associated with it, what I'm hearing from my colleagues is that we would like to maybe shift those funds, or the source of funds, from the capital improvement fund to the general fund.
Fair enough.
So I think everybody's right.
Yeah, so I don't know who you need in the room next week in order to make those determinations or what those questions are. Exactly.
Mr. Weaver and Mr. Venner, can you guys reach out to colleagues on the CIC and see if we can get something?
The treasurer of the CIC.
Can do it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much. All right.
Next item. Next item is the Parks and Service Maintenance Complex. Actually, the next two items are things that we added very recently that are not in your book, but we do feel that a modest amount of money is allocated for continued efforts towards the Parks and Service Maintenance Complex. On the next slide, there is a question as to what's the status of basically reinventing the Parks and Service Complex. I'll go to the question real quick, just to make sure I get it correct. When and how are we planning on addressing the aging streets and utilities complex? We've investigated no short of 3 properties in this calendar year for the reinventing of that particular complex, and none of those properties have come to fruition. They're a property that we own on Taylor Road that we did a wetland delineation on, and it would be cost prohibitive for us to develop on that particular piece of property. And then 2 private development sites, in the industrial area that also didn't necessarily bear fruit because one was unappealing to us, and then the other one was, there's actually a different development proposal going on that particular property. So one of the things that we'd like to allocate out of the general fund, because this would just be for planning purposes and not necessarily capital yet, more of a study, would be how can we potentially be utilizing the existing property and reinventing the existing property, and does it make sense for us to potentially not relocate, but redesign and reimagine that particular property for this particular service? Where I don't want to say we're out of options. I mean, we've even looked at options that potentially aren't in the city of Gahanna to house a garage, because we don't have 10 to 12 acres to put this particular facility on. Facility down at Oklahoma is about 8. There's some flood issues, but they're not that bad. And then the floodway is relatively contained to the creek area. So part of this 100,000 would be to be able to do site investigations down there, get a good understanding of what that property and profile actually looks like, to basically develop, hopefully, potentially, some site planning work as to what a modern facility in that particular location could look like. And then potentially, that's not going to cost us $100,000 necessarily, but then what could, if there are some other properties that do come up, is there the ability to do similar investigations on those properties so that we can continue to move that forward? I will apologize. This should have been in the budget originally, and it wasn't. And I'll bear that cross.
And just a process clarification, this was from a prior meeting, this is a follow-up from a prior.
The question, yes, the question is from a prior conversation that we've had. But then it falls under city facilities, which is why we asked it be deferred to the night.
Sure, understood. Council, anything further on that particular item? Mr. Schultz, did I hear you correctly? You said there was a property in the industrial park that was unappealing? You guys didn't like the sunset or something there?
Correct. Correct.
Was it close enough to Edison?
It was relatively close. Yes. Location wasn't bad. But no, to clarify, and I will clarify for the record, actually, the only issue with that particular property was the land assembly that was required didn't actually get us a good enough profile to actually, for it to actually be a serviceable location, which then therefore made it unappealing. But no, it was relatively close to Edison.
Yeah, no, I remember when we were workshopping, was that 2 years ago? Over in the senior center? This was one of the items that we were kicking around, and the challenge was, where do you put it, right? There's not, as you said, there's not a lot of 10 or 12 acre parcels just laying around within the city's borders, unfortunately.
Right.
So.
Well, and the pressure right now, the development pressure is it's going to, 10 to 12 is going to add, 2 to 3 million to the project. So we're also conscious of those types of issues and challenges. Next item is very similar to the previous one, but basically to do some planning work, if you would, around this particular property, and what it is that we would potentially be using it for, or somebody else, maybe more appropriately, would be using it for in the future. Obviously, there are things that come with selling a piece of property even, but, like doing appraisals and those things. Appraisals do not cost $50,000, but we're asking for a slightly larger number. So if we were to get in a contractual arrangement with somebody to, do development plans around this 5 acres, 5.5 acres here, we wouldn't, at this particular moment, there are no plans, honestly, there's no plans for either the 100 or the 50. But we do know that hopefully there's not hopefully, that there needs to be efforts put toward both of these complexes in 2025.
Mr. Weaver?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director. So somewhat dovetailing from our conversation last week around facilities. Who is Elford or someone on the city team, I guess, managing, it might be you, managing the transition of what's salvageable from here that we could take with us to 825?
I was in over the weekend measuring desks and figuring out where, not this particular table, because I don't know that this one's making the list. But we're literally at this particular moment assigning existing furniture to new locations over in the new building. Those types of assets, right? We've been through the PD as an example, right? They had by code, they needed a fire-rated cabinet that needs to go in the Sally Port to store gas cans and I think flares and some other things, right? So those things are being inventoried, and we're figuring out what we can be taking with us and what needs to be purchased new. So those efforts are underway. And we're working with, that's more on the MSA side. Elford gets involved in those sides as it relates to transitions and those types of things. But one of the things is also putting together a logistical plan on how we move 3 facilities into one. 3 facilities, but 12 departments, 13 departments, however many it is, that all they don't need to move all at day one. right? But you know, that whole first floor needs to move on day one. The whole entire police department is another example, needs to move on day one. But you know, are there upper, you know, when does the senior center move? As an example, do they move first, or do they move closer to last, right? And those types of things. So, yeah, that's all being thought of. There is, as it relates to those particular mechanics and logistics, those are already in our existing 24 allocations on the project. I'm not saying that. I know there's a modest, I want to say it's $50,000 that we budgeted for actual moving expenses. So muscle basically to move us from here to there. I can't do that. You know, I'm not exactly sure what a contract like that does look like, so there could potentially be an ask down the road.
I guess to put a pin in it, I appreciate that the effort is being made to salvage and repurpose or reuse what is salvageable and it still has a useful life for our future home. And what I think I heard in there is that MSA and yourself are working to identify what those hard items are that will be making that journey.
Correct. And it's more than just me, but yes, correct.
Thank you.
Anything further on that item, council? This is not a prepared question, but just as we've kind of covered some ground here this evening, the timing seems like it might work with the economic development strategy and the disposition of this parcel that we currently sit at. Do you envision, Madam Mayor, that would be part of, again, the output that we would receive from perhaps planning next?
I hadn't thought of that necessarily being part of the economic development strategy. Was that discussed?
That is not in the scope
Right.
of services.
Right, I think that is a more immediate evaluation that needs to happen, which is what Director Schultz was referencing earlier. I think the strategy itself would focus more on our future business attraction, business growth, where we need to focus our efforts, everything from housing to what sectors we need to focus on, the incentive toolkit, how we remain competitive, et cetera. I think to evaluate this particular parcel would be a very specific project that almost is more in line with Director Blackford sitting here. He's been quiet the whole night. But as you know, one of his priorities for next year is looking at the land use plan because it'll be 5 years next year. Or 5 years this year, I suppose. You know, and with the new zoning code and does the land use plan need to be tweaked, and does that play a role into evaluating future uses for that? I would think that is a more immediate impact than the economic development strategy.
I just, when I think about the disposition of, I mean, this is public property, right? It sits right on the main drag. And while this is perhaps outside the scope of the discussion of the budget, if we have the ability to work this in with consultants that we might have on hand, I think that would go a long way, because there's 36,000 plus people that are going to have an opinion of what this should be.
Correct. Well, and I would agree with you. I'm sorry if I cut you off. Having an outside consultant provide us with some evaluation and options as to what maximizes the ROI for the city and for the overall residents of the community. I think that is extremely important as we continue to move forward, so that we have that input, so that it can be evaluated both from the administrative standpoint and to make recommendations to council, and council to consider and decide as well.
Thank you. Anything further from council on these departments that we've covered this evening? Okay, seeing none. So I had sent out an email on Friday just asking if there was any appetite to have, I suppose, council member to council member deliberations over the budget to date. It is 10:01, so I don't want to twist anybody's arm, but just as, you know, your chair of Finance Committee, I'm here to facilitate a conversation. So if there's any appetite to engage in some of those deliberations that would otherwise take place next Monday on the 9th, I just wanted to at least make sure, I'm sorry, on the 2nd. I at least wanted to make sure that that opportunity was given. Anything from council, any items that or causing particular consternation or heartburn or anything like that, or do we just want to wrap it up and see you on the 2nd? See you on the 2nd? Mr.
I
Weaver?
guess, thank you, Chair. I guess my thought would be, I also would love to see you all on the 2nd. But I wonder if it'd be helpful for the administration if we could identify some of the areas this evening where we do have consternation, if there is any, and helpful to you. Any items that we would like to see further explored or come back, anything like I'll just be frank. One item that I do have a little consternation over is the facility superintendent. I don't know that that is not the right word, for lack of a better word, appropriate at this time versus in another year.
It's certainly been noted. My view on staffing is I'm going to take what we've learned here today and kind of digest it and look at it more comprehensively. But if anyone else is further along in their assessment and understanding of the budget, again, I'm happy to facilitate further conversation. Ms. Jones?
Yeah, I would just throw out, so I think from a staffing perspective, I think I trust the city and I don't have huge concerns there. I think for me, where I have more question, I guess, is I get contracted services. And so we've broken those out. I mean, I think I understand contract services from, specific tangible items, fees, services, things that we have. I think where I have more question or concern about is all of the different consultants and if there's possibility to reduce or condense consultants doing certain things. I do recognize that there's less request for that 2025 than there has been in 2024, but I guess what I will continue to look at and ask would be, are we truly assessing the need for those and being as objective as possible about when we truly need those consultants or not?
Is there any particular output that you're looking for, Ms. Jones, on the 2nd?
Some of the questions today have helped answer questions, so I think for me, I just need to go away and bring back next week of like, cool, I'm good with the answers and I can take it and move on. I don't have like an exact number, but I just think we have a lot of them.
Without a doubt, I saw the spreadsheet too.
Yeah, we have a lot of them.
Colleagues, anything further? I hate to even suggest special, but I know the crystal ball is cracked and cloudy. Does anyone think that a special is needed between now and the 2nd? And we think we can cover this on the 2nd. Because as I'm staring at the budget calendar right now, we would deliberate on the 2nd. We would provide guidance to the administration. They would come back with an amended budget on the 9th. Presumably, that would be substantially what we would approve by vote on the 16th. If we think we can cover that in one session.
Let me ask a question about process,
Sure.
because I have a couple outstanding questions, I know, to the administration about some line items. And I've requested additional information on the parks manager position as well. So in terms of process, should we anticipate a presentation to follow up on some of the outstanding questions? And can we limit that presentation such that we've got adequate time to deliberate so it's not 10 o'clock?
So we will have some information on the parks manager, as we've discussed. I'll have information on the facilities superintendent without additional information on the contract services. I mean, there's many lines across many departments. So if there are specific questions, it would be very helpful to have those in advance. I know it is a short week. We are off Thursday and Friday. So that was one of my questions was, should we expect questions or not? Because if there are specific programs or contract services or positions that you would like more information about or clarification, it is very helpful to us to have that ahead of time. So I have noted the facility superintendent, the parks manager, the question about the CIC, but right now those would be the only outstanding questions that I have tracked.
we were to submit questions to you, when do you need them by? I mean,
Like tomorrow, if you're out, yeah, I mean, if
Essentially
you're
tomorrow.
out Thursday and Friday.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd rather have the questions ahead of time during the 4-day holiday than to sit up here and have to come up with the, like, sure, we can answer a lot of things, but there's a lot of people with a lot of, just like the $500,000, I have part of the information, Kevin has part of the information, Joanne has part of the information. So it's very difficult for us to sit up here and just answer when, if you're going to ask a question about something, I guess, is, through conversation we can answer, but if you're going to answer a question, Mr. Weaver said he's going to ask something about the facility superintendent, I know that and can be prepared that way. So if there are other items or other programs, that would be helpful to know anytime before Monday at 9 a.m.
Understood. Do we want to continue with our current cadence, which is submit questions to me? You fine with questions going direct? I mean,
I can
it's
give,
coming to me, I would say have them to me by Tuesday night, and I'll have them in your inbox on Wednesday morning. But if,
I was just say, I have one, I have concerns about the $100,000 grant program for the nonprofits. I mean, it was a federal fund, I understand it, but I have a problem with using taxpayer dollars. That was kind of not what issue 12 was about. It's not really, I mean, and I say that as we got part of the grant as a historical society, so it's not that I don't appreciate the money, I just think that that was maybe a 1 or 2 time thing and maybe not something we should continue.
I'll be prepared to speak about that, at least from a council perspective next week, from my perspective on council.
So are there other questions that, like Ms. McGregor just brought up the community grants, right? And Mr. Weaver brought up the superintendent. So we know that Ms. Bowers, I mean, are there others hanging out there that that haven't been listed tonight, because now we're up to 4, but that's really all we have. So if there are others, if you guys know of others that we're not mentioning tonight, it would be helpful.
sure, full disclosure, I'll just say staffing in general, right? I mean, and I'm not here to pick on staffing, but as a service organization, right, it's our number 1 line item, and it's grown. I get it, our services are increasing as well. But I would anticipate next Monday having some discussion surrounding that. What is currently not getting done, that will be done in 2025 with the addition of those. Last year, I think we literally did for lack of a better word, almost a straw poll, where we said this position, all right, just went down the line. Who supports it? If we can get to 4, it's in. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibilities. If there are a few that are kind of sticking out there, for example, facility superintendent, parks manager, if there are some that are slam dunks, we don't have to spend a whole lot of time on them, but I just want to make sure that what we're giving to you guys at the end of that meeting is ultimately, what can pass on the 16th.
Correct.
Council, any heartburn with that?
No, I think
process?
my outstanding question was, I want to make sure that whatever presentation there is synced and we keep it tight
Without a
so
doubt,
that we have time to
Yeah.
get through the.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that to this point, as informative as it has been, there has not been much council-to-council dialogue regarding the budget. It's been a lot of information gathering and fact-finding. We need to do that, inherently political process of coming to a consensus on something that can pass on the 16th. If we think we can do that on one day, on the 2nd, we'll give it a shot. If not, I guess we've got a special looming in the background before the 9th. Okay. If council has any formal questions that they want, any additional fact-finding type information that they want from the administration, feel free to send it to me. If you can get it to me by Tuesday night, I'll get it in your inbox, Miranda, by Monday morning. And then with that, everyone have a happy Thanksgiving. Thus concludes finance, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.